elementary districts. Would you please rise and join me for the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and you may be seated. This with a roll call vote. Jana Hafer.
Present.
Thanks, Jana. Joe Raffiani.
Here.
Russ Hall.
Here.
Thanks, Russ. Michael Leo.
I'm here.
Mike. Scott McCullough.
Here.
Jen Hoffman.
Here.
Brian Yates is excused, and Tanya Ludwig is excused. Before we start this agenda, I'd like to just pause for a moment. We're all here because we want what's best for kids. We want the best educational opportunity for kids. But in addition to that, we're parents and we're grandparents with a deep love for our own. One of our own has suffered a deep tragedy. Tanya Ludwig, one of our trustees, her son Eric was tragically killed in a car accident on Sunday. And I just like to pause for a moment and remember Tanya and her daughter and have us reflect and hold dear those that we love and hug them a little tighter. So if we just pause. Thank you. So that moves us on to the agenda and happier news. The first item is the canvass of votes of July 7th, 2020. It's the elementary school levy. We had a little over 44% of our community participating, and we had 54.75 votes for, 45.25 votes against. And I would like to thank the community. We are grateful for the support that you have in us, for the financial support that you have invested. And the suggested action is to approve the official canvass of votes from the July 7th, 2020 mail ballot election for the elementary school mill levy. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion by Joe Raffiani. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
And a second by Michael Leo. Thank you. Further discussions or comments? Seeing none, I will call for the question by roll. Joe Raffiani.
Aye.
Jana Hafer.
Aye.
Russ Hall.
Aye.
Thanks, Russ. Michael Leo.
Aye.
Scott McCullough.
Aye.
Jennifer Hoffman.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So the motion passes unanimously from a very grateful board. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Mr. Weldon.
Hi, it's Jeff. Sorry. The elementary issue, or the elementary bond was mill levy was just an elementary issue. So probably Russ's vote ought not be recorded.
Well, Russ and Jennifer, but we appreciate their verbal support. Thanks for the correction. I appreciate that, Jeff. So that moves us on to communication from the public. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of listening to members of the public in its meeting. The board also recognizes the statutory and constitutional right of the public to participate in governmental operations, and the board encourages members of the public to participate in and express opinions about issues important to the district. As we have been doing since we started the virtual meeting, we accept public comment through our Billings Public School portal, and now starting 2 hours preceding the meeting and concluding 30 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Although unlikely, this will allow the staff time to review the comments to ensure there are no privacy issues that have been compromised. Public comment can be submitted in electronic format using the Google Documents link provided on the district's webpage. When you go to the district's homepage or school board page, a pop-up window will appear with a link to the Google document. Submissions do require full name and home address in order to be submitted for the record, limited to 500 words. Submissions will be screened and read verbally by our district clerk. So Mr. Van Nuys, communication from the public?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have 24 comments this evening. So
Thank
I'll
you.
just get started here. The first is from Megan Heenan at 2325 38th Street West. The comment starts, I previously sent the following to Mr. Uppleman, the board. First and foremost, I want to thank you for the past 5 months navigating these uncharted waters of quarantines and online learning. I have very much appreciated your transparency, availability, and genuine desire to keep us as parents and students informed and involved. Facebook Live posts have helped answer countless questions and calm our nerves as much as possible. In taking all of that into consideration, I think we as a district rocked the switch to an online learning platform on a dime. That is all thanks to you and the incredible teachers in our district. You have a heavy burden to bear, and I appreciate your leadership. Thank you. Now we are staring down another school year with the pandemic not showing any signs of slowing. In fact, daily new positive cases just keep breaking records. I filled out the survey online, but truthfully, how are we supposed to decide what is best for our families with so little detail? Things that will ultimately guide my decision are, will all students be in the school full time? How long will the school day be? Which of the CDC guidelines will you be following? Which are not feasible? Why exactly will you choose not to punish noncompliance with mask wearing? As my high school senior aptly pointed out, schools have no problem punishing for dress code violations, and quite honestly, a belly button showing isn't potentially deadly. Not wearing a mask is. If kids come to school with a cough, are they automatically sent home? What about if a child has a fever while at home? What are the criteria for being allowed back in? Test results take at least a week to receive currently. Are they to stay home until they receive a negative test result? When there is a positive COVID case in a classroom, will the whole classroom then quarantine? How about siblings of the kids in said classroom? With 4 kids in SD2, we literally could end up in a constant quarantine if we decide to return. When kids are in quarantine, do they automatically switch to online learning? Is it feasible to expect the teachers and kids to seamlessly switch from one platform to the other? What about our teachers? Do they get to choose as well whether they prefer to teach online or in person? Those that teach in person will certainly be in quarantine often. Who will be the substitutes in that case? On a good year, quality subs are hard to find, and I can't imagine this year would be any different. In fact, I guess it would be much harder. I'm assuming the 10 absences per semester rule for students is out the window. What will buses, lunch, recess, assemblies, choir, art, etc., look like? What training have the teachers had in order to help switch teaching to an online platform? I look forward to hearing the plan and hopefully having these questions answered Monday at the board meeting. Thank you. Finally, I know that school is so much more than just classes for many, many students. I appreciate that for those, the risk of contracting COVID-19 is less than the risk of spending another semester trying to learn at home online with food instability, little or no internet access, and possibly in a dangerous home situation, or literally even without a home. On top of that, some students purely need to learn in a classroom for any number of reasons. Perhaps, though, this upcoming semester, we need to rethink how we are approaching the return to school. Maybe we need to use online learning as our standard and use in-class learning for those that need to be in school. Families that can keep kids home and students that can learn online should perhaps be expected to stay home, leaving in-person learning for those who need it most. This would put everyone involved in a safer scenario. Fewer kids in the schools ensures safety for those who attend. As you have stated, there are no good solutions for us this upcoming fall. We all have to find the best of the not great options for our families. I don't envy your situation, but I do thank you for your leadership. Sincerely, Megan Heenan. Okay, the next comment is from Jennifer Yoder at 640 Custer Avenue, apartment 2. Comment is, there is a social media post circulating regarding a letter that the Bozeman School District sent out to parents stating that that will have a protocol in place in the event that a classroom may need to quarantine. The letter does not go into detail regarding what the protocol will be, which seems to be causing some panic amongst parents. What will Billings schools have as the protocol to quarantine a classroom? Will parents be allowed to promptly pick up their child to bring them home? The next comment is from Lori Friat at 1219 North 31st Street. Can you provide information on what the online program will look like this year? Will it be the same as last year, or will it have more teacher-led guidance throughout the day instead of parental teaching? Can you describe what it will look like? Next comment from Robin Angholm at 3108 Amelia Circle. I would like it known that if traditional school means masks, plexiglass, and remaining in the same room all day, my children will be doing virtual school, regardless if you require special circumstances or not. If your board meetings are still taking place via Zoom, sending the children to school shouldn't even be up for discussion. I request on behalf of my family that you consider virtual school through Christmas break and reassess at that time. If one teacher tests positive for COVID, imagine the domino effect for all students and families in that classroom. Apparently, there is talk at the state level of quarantining our children at the school if a child or teacher is positive. While this may be rumor, I would like it addressed and known that my kids would come home. Thank you. Okay, next is from Chris Fryette at 1219 North 31st Street. Can you describe what classrooms will look like? Will the kids get any form of socialization at all? Okay, next comment is from Shannon Larson at 334 Future Circle. I'm curious how you plan to socially distance in schools that have 500 plus students in them. When classroom size is 20 to 30 kids and room size won't allow for 6 feet between each child plus a teacher. Also, how are you planning to handle distancing during lunch when they won't be able to wear a mask? What about gym class? What about band? No mask for a lot of instruments? And what about playgrounds? I'm also curious about the Quest program. Will it be going to a different school once a week as before? Okay, next comment is from Luke Hudson at 3785 Glance Drive. Dear Board and Superintendent Upham, I am writing to you as a father of 3 school-age children requesting that the board move back to in-person board meetings. It is time to find a way to allow for in-person board meetings allowing live public comments. The public comments read by the clerk is not the same as allowing the public to speak directly to the board. I have great concerns about the upcoming school year. I would love to express those in person instead of across this keyboard. Please do whatever you can to find a way to allow for public comment in person, not read by the clerk for your next upcoming board meeting. In regards to the upcoming school year, I am also requesting that the board consider a waiver for the students who are unable to wear a mask for the duration of the school day. I have a child who has difficulty breathing and it would not be possible for her to wear a mask for the entire school day, but she doesn't want to be singled out and miss out on in-person instruction. The decisions this board makes are not easy, and we don't take those decisions or the weight of them lightly as the public. School District 2 is a large, diverse district with tens of thousands of students. My final point is this: the science is not settled on these matters. There are studies that have been conducted about the rate of infection in children and the ability for children to spread the virus. Daycare centers in our town are open and have been since prior to the mask mandate. They didn't require masks. We have seen members of the school district staff, teachers, principals, students around town over the summer, many with no masks and no social distancing. How are the schools going to operate with recess, lunch, gym, PE classes? I assume you will allow the students to remove the mask for these? Well, if they can be next to other students in these situations with no mask, why require a mask at all? The governor's mask mandate is in effect, but if it is lifted, I would suggest the board take a hard look at the data and science and determine that in a large, diverse district like School District 2, one size doesn't fit all. Okay, next comment is from Rachel Smith Flores at 1035 Anchor Avenue. I would like to know if having a parent or someone that lives with them that is at a higher risk will qualify to allow the student to be eligible for distance learning. Next comment from Michelle Kosakowski at 2026 Central. I think they should have in-person classes. Next comment from Brooke Hudson at 3785 Glance Drive. First, let me say in-person school board meetings with public comment needs to be in operation during these big discussions about opening up the schools. Secondly, I'm wondering if any of you currently have elementary aged kids. Have you discussed the extra challenges of teaching elementary kids with masks? Have you considered how to teach kindergartners with their face covered? How do you sound out letters with assistance from the teacher without the ability to see their mouth? You need to sound out letters in order to learn to read. As an educator myself, I am curious how dedicated to education my fellow teachers, administrators, and school board members are when you are willing to pass off an education that falls short of what we all know the kids need. Faces need to be seen when checking for learning and understanding. What about special needs kids? I've heard discussion of making those students be remote learners. What happened to NCLB? Special needs kids actually need the structure of the school day more than the average student. Statistically speaking, it is extremely rare for children to get COVID. There is no documented evidence of children passing COVID to adults. I'm concerned that we are letting all these nervous parents and teachers dictate the school for the rest of us. Nervous parents have always had the option to homeschool. I've seen teachers, administrators, counselors, secretaries, and other students all summer long without masks at the pool, the store, garage sales, etc. And now with our kids' education on the line, we are changing our view. I encourage you not to change the whole view on education based on fear not backed by scientific data. At the very least, allow parents to send their kids without a mask and sign a waiver that we won't hold the school responsible for any sickness. Thanks for your time. Next comment is from Brianne Hood at 1056 Willoma Drive. Question 1, will clean new masks be provided and required for each student every day? Question 2, if students show up without a mask or take their mask off during the day, will they be asked to leave school? Question 3, are students going to be screened upon entry every day at school? If so, will there be time allowed for that? In other words, will school start earlier so the kids are still in class by 8 a.m.? Question 4, will the mandatory mask be in addition to other restrictions such as less students in a class or not switching classes? If so, why do we need these other restrictions if the masks work so well? Why cannot it be one or the other? Will there be restrictions on the type of mask face covering the children have to wear? Or are the kids going to be allowed to wear whatever type of face covering they choose? In question 6, if a child suffers from, say, allergies and has a sneezing attack in class, will they be required to put on a fresh, clean mask? The next comment is from Casey Lujan at 820 Broadwater. Will school employees and students be required to take a COVID-19 test before school starts? Okay, next comment is from Amelia Nelson Williams. Dear school board and whomever this concerns, everyone has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. I have heard talk of bringing people back into schools, though I do not think bringing students and teachers, staff back into school this year is a good idea right now. I believe that distance learning is the best we can do in the moment to help keep everyone safe and healthy, even if it is for the whole year or just a semester. While kids are less likely to get COVID-19, what about staff at schools? Right now, the majority of people with COVID-19 are adults. Schools, like most other places, are run by adults. There is at least one or more teacher in every classroom, plus people who serve you lunch, janitors, nurses, etc. There are also older teachers at school who can be targets to coronavirus. So why take the risk of bringing people back into schools when there is another solution? If one person gets COVID-19, would the whole school have to close and scramble to start distance learning again? Why not begin the year with distance learning so we can be prepared for it? Just imagine what it would be like bringing students back into schools. It would be tricky to keep masks on all kids, keep them all socially distanced, and have them all be as sanitary as possible. My 8-year-old brother going into second grade can barely keep a mask on while we run into the store really quick. It would be even harder to keep masks on kindergartners for 6 to 7 hours, not to mention trying to keep them inside all day, or being distanced in the hectic halls at my school and many others. Don't forget to think about supplies. Because of COVID-19, we can't share books, computers, chairs, and everything in between. For example, in my math class last year, we all touched the same books to rip out packets that we needed to work on. Also, in regular English class, 5 different periods of students shared the same books almost every day. Things like that would be bad to do this year in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Imagine trying to do a class like gym in a time like this where multiple different classes all sweat together and use the same equipment. Besides, wouldn't students and staff just be bringing germs from home to school and back every day for a whole school year? If someone like my mom, who has a rare disease, gets COVID-19, it could be fatal. Going back to school is absolutely not an option for me and my siblings, and probably many others. Even though distance learning was hard for us all, we can get through it again, but be more prepared for it. It wouldn't be like how we ended the 2019-2020 school year, because we all had because we all have experienced it firsthand and therefore have knowledge on how to get through it again and come out stronger. We certainly have the technology too. If every student that needed one had a computer, iPad, and charger with free internet, no one can say that their student didn't have the resources to do schoolwork. Everyone can then be accountable for the work that they do, the effort they put in, and the grade they get. I learned through the end of last year that no matter what, we are stronger together even when we are apart. Now is the time to prove it. Montana strong. Sincerely, Amelia Nelson Williams, soon to be 7th grader. Okay, next comment is, next two comments, both are from Renee Campbell at 3160 Gregory Drive West. The comment is, how will the district handle positive cases in schools? Will contacts, classes, or schools be quarantined? How will it be possible to keep high school students 6 feet apart? How about before and after school? My daughter is interested in a hybrid model like other Montana cities are looking at. What about doing that in high school here? How long before we need to decide in school or online learning? And the second comment from Ms. Campbell is, if we decide to do online learning fall semester, can we change to in class during spring semester? The next comment is from Amy Grosselak at 1635 Yellowstone Avenue. We need more options than what has been given thus far. Distance learning needs to be offered to all students. Last week's survey was a step in the right direction, and I'm sure you will find that there is a good percentage of parents who want to keep their kids home. If I am correct, rather than tiered days or rotating schedules wouldn't be necessary, as maybe half the kids will be staying home anyways. Also, younger kids should not have to wear a mask all day. Is it reasonable to expect a 5 or 6 year old to wear one when you have adults who won't? Plus, they are guaranteed to wear it correctly and to play with it. Plus they are guaranteed not to wear it correctly and to play with it so much that you make the point of it negligible. If you require teachers to wear them, they need to have microphones or something for the kids to hear them. Speech is so garbled, it's hard to hear when you are a foot away, let alone having to speak over 15 plus kids. Okay, the next comment is from Anjuli Ross at 1128 Lewis Avenue. Good evening. Billings Public Schools has always striven to provide a safe learning environment for our students. As a member of this community, parent, and a 13-year educator of BPS, I want to remind you that it is your job as a board to make decisions that keep our students and staff safe. There has been a disturbing trend across the U.S. that does not address the safety needs of the staff that teach and support students every day. Staff safety should be just as important as student safety. Teachers should not be left feeling like they have to beg for an alternative assignment if they themselves are high risk or an immediate family member is high risk. This is reality across our country. We have not been asked for our input on how to reopen schools we teach in every single day, or if we personally have a medical concern. Many teachers are left wondering if they will put their own lives at risk so they can bring home a paycheck to support their family. Students cannot feel safe in school if we continue to be the epicenter of the pandemic in Montana and have dozens of cases every day in our own community. Learning will never occur even in a building where students do not feel safe. COVID is now known to be an airborne virus that can spread through as little as breathing. Recent studies have now confirmed that students 10 and older spread the virus just as effectively as adults, creating a very grim situation for our schools. We are naive to think our students and staff will be unaffected if we go back to school. We should not be opening and closing schools constantly because we did not have a better plan. We also should not have confirmed cases of COVID in a building and expect our county to determine contact tracing in a building with hundreds of students. We will create more chaos and stress on our families if we open and close constantly. Our families should be able to choose remote learning because we need to respect each parent's decision for their student. Any in-person learning should be as safe as humanly possible, with teachers and small group students not rotating groups in a building. Even this is a risky because even with the best of ventilation systems, the virus still can spread. We cannot control what choices parents make for their children outside our building, but we can control the amount of interaction students and staff have in our building to reduce the spread. Our focus should be on meeting the needs of students on a remote learning platform and for students who really need to be in the buildings in a small group. Billings Public Schools need to step up and be part of the solution and not adding to an ever-growing problem. Okay, a few more here. Next one is from Jessica Brackey at 905 Avenue F. What is school going to look like for our new kindergarten students? My daughter should be starting at Highland Elementary, and we are unaware of what to prepare for. Do we buy supplies? Will they have regular classes like gym, music, etc.? Will they get to eat lunch with their new friends? Okay, next comment is from Laura Gordon at 458 Constitution. If your student census is low enough, would you allow students that want to attend in person full time? Next comment is Amelia Marquez at 1522 Virginia Lane. I would like to advocate for remote learning for at least the beginning of the school year. It is not fair nor consistent for youth to go back and forth between learning methods. Our teachers do not get hazard pay and should not have to put their lives on the line. Next comment is from Michelle Trost at 4351 Ridgewood Lane. Good evening. I am the mother of a rising sophomore at West High. I completed the survey sent out earlier this week, but I was disappointed that there was not an option for a blended type schooling, some online and some in person. I think this would help to reduce the number of students in school, but still provides for some socialization and one-on-one help as well. This too is what my daughter would be in favor of. Thank you for your hard work and dedication. I know there are no easy answers, but wanted to raise this possibility as another option. Next comment, Laura Gordon at 458 Constitution. If parents elect to exclusively remote learn, will the grading and attendance be constant as it is when in school? Next comment is from Tabitha Sherrod at 1708 Stirrup Road. I want my daughter to attend school full-time in the classroom. It was a joke trying to do online classes. She learned nothing. I had to spend hours trying to teach her when I'm not a teacher and don't want to be one. Okay, and the final comment is from Verena Miller at 1249 Matador Avenue. Thank you for sending out the survey. I do feel like it would be informative to include a hybrid option with some in-class learning as well as remote learning as a third option. I also wonder what PE will look like if kids go back to school. Also, I may not be up to date on all of the details, but I am hoping that if parents are simply not comfortable with sending their children to school at this time out of worry, that will be reason enough to be granted 100% online learning until things return to normal. And that's it for public comment.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you to our community members that have taken the time to share their heartfelt concerns and comments with them. They're deeply appreciated. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and the board is asked to approve the agenda as presented. Do I have a suggested action to approve?
Madam Chair, so moved.
Really? My thumbs on me.
Madam Chair, I made the motion to approve.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Tanya Ludwig, and just for the record, Tanya has joined us. Tanya, want you to know you are in our thoughts and in our hearts, and during this time of.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye through a roll call vote. Joe Raffiani. Did I lose Joe? Jana Hafer.
Aye.
Russ Hall.
Aye.
Mike Leo.
Aye.
Scott McCullough.
Aye.
Aye.
Tanya Ludwig.
Aye.
Do you have a connection with him? And the chair votes aye. Motion passes unanimously. That then moves us on to the superintendent's report, which I think will be hopefully addressing a lot of the comments that were raised. Superintendent Upham is going to share with us information about the summer programming that has been ongoing, as well as the discussions regarding opening schools, and then the ongoing communication that he has with the other double A superintendents across the state of Montana. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And someone has some auxiliary sound going on. If you have your audio, if there's a radio playing or something in the background, if you can address that, I would appreciate it. I know that there are a lot of people watching. Well, I greatly appreciate the public comment, Madam Chair, and members of the board. We have a significant issue in front of us, but we can do this. We can address this, and we can do this. And what I'm going to challenge all of us to do is to look for the breakthroughs versus identify the barriers. It's all about what we can't do and what we shouldn't do. We have to move forward, and we can move forward in as safe as manner as possible. Is there risk? Yes, there is. I'm not minimizing that, but we have to get our minds in a place that looks for solutions and not the barriers. All of us. I challenge all of us to get there. I'm confident in the information that I will be sharing both tonight, and then, Madam Chair, I'm going to request a special single topic board meeting next week to go through the reopening plan in detail because it is significant. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered and asked, and it would surpass the amount of time in this board meeting. But I am going to use as much specificity as I possibly can. But I'm going to say this again, collectively together, we have to look for the breakthroughs versus identify the barriers. They're real, they're substantial, but we can do this. We can work through this as a community and a school district. I invited several individuals who have been involved in the summer programming with students, with the safety protocols in place, the actual people with boots on the ground. We offered summer school both in live instruction to all grade levels, incoming kindergartners, seniors, and we have people to address them. This is not a staged conversation by any means. I wanted to invite these people not to talk about the program that they're involved with, but more so to talk about the students they're involved with, the parents they're involved with, the challenges, and also the breakthroughs that we have seen. So I'm going to have them go through their information with you, probably open it up for Q&A, and then immediately following that, I will go through the high points of the reopening plan and work to answer questions. My plan is to continue to communicate via Facebook Live, reach out to our teachers and our administrators in a Zoom meeting that we'll be setting up in the near future for feedback, to listen, to get that dialogue going back and forth after the plan has been disclosed and we've had the opportunity to discuss it. I'm sure there are a lot of areas and issues yet to be determined. I am very thankful that you know how I work. I love to build teams of experts that surround the issue and use the most current information, the most educated individuals that we have at our disposal. I'm very thankful for Mr. Felton. He is on right now. He will be giving a short report from his perspective. I'm also very thankful for Dr. Koo, the disease specialist at Billings Clinic. I'm also very thankful of a team of pediatricians that have assisted the information that we'll be sharing. We've also reached out through the governor's reopening plan, the CDC plan, the Academy of Pediatrics plan, the Office of Public Instruction plan, the Colorado Back to School plan, and then a district in Maryland who has done an excellent job of working through the information of reopening. We have done extensive research, and we will continue to do extensive research and the most active information that we have at this point in time. So the information that will be shared with you is the most current information that we have. Now, also, I'm going to speak extensively about remote learning because I think the dual platform is going to help everyone with this. There will be some parameters around it, but we're looking for a win-win situation, especially for families and students that are dealing with COVID issues, and also our faculty and staff that are dealing with COVID issues. And hopefully, we'll be able to marry those two together and create a safe environment as possible. But yet, in coming back to school, we have to be able to do what we do best, and that is teaching and learning. And so that is a priority. The 4 guiding priorities that the document is built around is the safety and health of student, staff, and families, student, staff, social, emotional well-being, equity, and then learning. And those are very four important facets. So what I'd like to do now, since kindergartners are the first ones to come into school, and yes, we did bring incoming kindergartners into our Kinder Jumpstart program with parent approval and the safety measures around them. And I'm thankful that Joe Walsh is here to share with you, what does that look like? What does it look like with incoming kindergartners? So Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you. So we are running a 6-week program that Joe will walk through. But again, the information here isn't to talk about the program per se. It's to talk about the issues that we're dealing with attached to COVID. So Mr. Walsh.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Upham. Madam Chair, trustees, thank you so much for the opportunity to share tonight, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing during these challenging times. I know it's been a lot. So as the superintendent mentioned, we've had several different programs going here at Newman all summer, and it's been great to have students back in the building while doing everything possible to keep everybody as safe as we can, which obviously is the challenge that is being talked about. So we've had 2 different programs. The first has been going since June 1st, and that is our summer reading program that is made up of 2 teachers that have 6 students at a time working to teach them in small group reading. And they've been doing that 3 days a week with students coming 3 different times throughout the day. So they have 3 sessions with 6 students each teacher. With that, we've been taking the safety protocols of having temp checks at the door. Students and staff have been wearing face coverings. We also have increased, obviously, our sanitizing and cleaning. And students also in that program have been using their own devices or all their own equipment. So the other program that Greg mentioned is the opportunity to bring our newest students in, our brand new kindergartners that are coming in for this school year. We brought them in a few weeks ago on July 6th. And again, that was with parent support, and just a huge shout out to the parents and teachers, because it's their teamwork that has made that possible. So we've had 14 students here at Newman. I also reached out to Principal Gogler at Orchard and Clay Heron at Ponderosa, the principals there, to ask them. They too are running their Jumpstart programs to see just how it's going at their schools. And we've been finding a lot of consistent things. So here with our Jumpstart program, we have 14 students and 2 teachers. So the teachers are doing classes of 7 students each and doing their very best to social distance those students. We also have temp checks that we are doing at the very beginning of the program when they come in the morning. Also, the teachers are asking the COVID questions, wondering, just is anybody sick? Have they been exposed? Those basic questions that we've been encouraged to ask them. Parents have been wonderful in their response to those and working together. We also are having the students wear face coverings, and then again, increase in sanitation, hand washing, cleaning, all those sorts of things we've been doing throughout the day. With the Jumpstart program, which is worth noting, the students are also eating breakfast and lunch here at school. That program goes from 8 o'clock in the morning to 11:30. So I point those things out just so you can kind of see the basics of what those programs are. And I would say that we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot this summer in bringing those programs into school. And it's been, like I said, great to have them here, but we've learned a lot of lessons. The first is just how critical it is, as Superintendent mentioned, is to try to, amongst all the fear that's going on, is to try to stay positive and to really control what we can. And the students and the staff have been doing a remarkable job with that. So we've been working really hard to control what we can and to deliver great learning opportunities for the students. We've learned that with the face coverings, I know there's a lot of different challenges that exist, and the truth is that there are challenges with our reading program and with our kindergartners coming in. I would be lying if I said that the face coverings, there weren't some challenges that come. But the thing that surprised me, and I think what we've learned, is that the students have adapted remarkably well and quickly. They get better each day. They're wearing them. They're not complaining. they are doing the very best they can to wear their masks correctly and to do what their teachers ask them to do. We've learned with the face coverings that it's essential that we, honor the fact that they can be uncomfortable and give the students breaks and let them have time where they can take them off or pull them down or itch or scratch or breathe, those kind of things. So the teachers recognizing that and doing what they do well, work that into their day and have mask breaks or face covering breaks where they can use that time to kind of make sure they're apart and then take those breaks. There are the challenges that you can think of with students wearing them around their chin or, kind of playing with them, poking at them. All those things are the reality. However, again, the lesson that we've learned with the face coverings is that they've adapted well. They've been troopers with them, and they continue to get better and better every day. So that's the update with masks as far as what we're seeing. Don't want to paint a false picture saying there's not challenges, but it's been a lot better than I think we initially thought it would be. The biggest lesson that we've probably learned in talking to the other principals and just watching the program here, and the teachers emphasize this as their number one lesson, is just how difficult it really is to social distance. The students, they don't do it maliciously or to break rules, but they really struggle staying away from each other. We have them separated in classes, and before you know it, they're helping each other out, or they're looking at each other's work in a positive way and kind of working together. And they're there like magnets together. That's both in small group or when they're in whole group. They just tend to want to be together, as we know. And so that's been a challenge. And I think having the masks has made that a little bit more feel a little bit safer, knowing that we're trying our very best to keep them social distance. However, they do have a tendency to come together. So having the face coverings at least gives us that extra barrier of protection. So those are the major lessons we're seeing. Like I said, I can't thank the teachers enough for how supportive and patient and creative they're being. They're doing a remarkable job. They're also doing things like working into their day. And we know this as far as good teaching goes, just giving lots of repetition, practice time, building into their day the routines of hand washing and hand sanitizing and cleaning. And so they've just built that right into their day, and the students are starting to learn what the new normal is. And that's both with the students that we see in our reading program and for those new incoming kindergarten students. So those are the biggest things. And lastly, just a big shout out and thank you to the parents. They've been extremely supportive. Like I mentioned, working together as a team, they've been very flexible and understanding and communicating with us daily. So we appreciate the opportunity to be able to have these programs. We recognize that they can be, certainly we don't have all the answers and they're challenging, but it's been great to get back to education.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. If we could hold questions until everyone gets through, it would save maybe some time. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Smith. Jennifer worked with the parents on the Native American Academy that's going on. We have quite a few students ranging from first grade through fifth grade. And so, Jennifer, share with us maybe some of the conversations that you're having with parents, and then I'll introduce Cassie to talk about the actual day-to-day.
Sure. Greg, as you mentioned, my staff, in addition to some of our certified teachers in the district, started our Native Summer Academy. Our target population for that is kids going into first grade, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade. We, at this time, have at any given day between about 40 to 45 students. When we first started the program, we were pretty clear with parents about what it was going to look like, the fact that we would, we didn't actually know until the day the program started whether or not we were going to be masking staff and students. So literally up until about 10 minutes before we brought students in, we weren't sure. So it was last minute notice for the parents. I have to say that every single family was receptive. We had no pushback whatsoever. When we brought the kids in, we obviously gave everybody masks. The first day was a little tough because they're not accustomed to having something on their face. I should point out that we run the program every morning from 9 until 2. So it's a full day program. We did have conversations with the kids about why they were wearing the masks, because we had a few of the younger ones that were a little hesitant or maybe a little freaked out. And we just talked about germs, and all the kids are aware that there's an issue with illness going on in our communities. They understand it on different levels, I think. But what we reinforced was we just want to keep our germs to ourselves, because we don't want to get our friends or our family sick. The Indian community, we worry a great deal about our elders. We kind of put that out there for the kids. They understood completely. Had a little bit of difficulty with the messing with them that first day, but no pushback. I would absolutely concur with Joe in the sense that the kids adjusted quite easily, not easily, I guess, as good as could be expected to the routine, because to the kids, this is just another routine. Kids are used to learning routines in school. And so this was just another one kind of added to their plate. I think it was a little bit tougher for us as adults, because we don't have to accommodate the same kind of routines as adult people. So the kids have done a remarkable job. We do not require them to wear them when they are outside. We do traditional games outside with the kids. We even have some breaks. So there is time when they're outside amongst each other on playground equipment. So again, I would probably agree with what Joe was saying in the sense that social distancing does not come naturally to kids. Kids are magnets to each other. Plus they haven't seen each other for months. Very excited to be around each other. We taught them, if you put your arms out to the side, you shouldn't be able to touch somebody's fingertips even. So they understand that, but as soon as they put their arms down, then they're kind of magnets right next to each other again. They've been taught to line up one behind another, and trying to figure out how to line up 6 feet behind somebody else. Sorry, guys. 6 feet behind somebody else is not realistic. So I have a crew of 1 foot tall guard dogs. But, and even like circle time or sitting on the rug or something like that, they'll start out apart from each other, but then they migrate in because that's what kids do. And they want to sit by each other. They want to be nudging their buddy, things like that. So they don't understand the concept of social distancing. And even the older ones that do, they forget. We forget. But I'll let Casey speak a little bit more to that about what that looks like in the building. I don't feel it's possible to social distance kids on the playground or on play structures. The advantage is that you're outside. There's lots of airflow, but there's no way you're going to be if you're stressed about cleaning playground equipment. That's not a reality. So that, I guess that would be something. We do take temperatures each morning. We ask the questions of the families. We have had families call and say, I'm not sending my child today. They were coughing last night. So the families have been very observant of that and aware. And of course we honor that, and there's no penalty for not being there, or whatever. I think the other, and Casey can speak to this, the only other probably problem area I would see is lunch. We do eat lunch there, breakfast and lunch. And so we are fortunate in that we have the entire cafeteria that we can spread out and social distance kids. So there's only a couple at a table. So there is that distance there, because obviously they're not going to be wearing masks when they're eating. But again, kids slide, kids scoot. There is interplay there in which it's difficult to maintain that social distancing. So we've had nothing but, I'm so pleasantly surprised by the positive support and feedback we've had from the parents, and the work on behalf of the kids to try and do whatever it is we need them to do. That being said, I think Casey would be the right person to speak more to the within the classroom dynamics.
So Casey, sorry I called you Cassie. I was misreading. I got to practice my reading. I've been out 6 months myself. So Casey, maybe share the day-to-day operations, and you being a teacher is very critical in this.
All right, good evening. Thank you for having me. Yeah, like Jennifer said, we have 44 kids. We go from 8:30 in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Our staff ratio is, 1 to 4 right now. We have 10 staff members. Every morning we have the kids temperature check in the morning and we write that down. We record it. We do not allow parents into the building at this time. We just do all of our check-in through the outside. Our kids play on the playground in the morning. They come in for breakfast when they are done. We have breakfast at 8:30. They like she said, we have the whole cafeteria to ourselves, so that does make it easier to distance the children. We have 4 kids set up per table. They have a place marker where they sit every day, and as soon as they're done, we sanitize, and then they go into their classrooms. As soon as they enter classrooms, they are sanitizing and washing their hands with soap and water. We have 3 classrooms that we are using right now. We put 10 students in each classroom, and we have lined the hallways with computers to help social distance our kids so they're not all together at once. But it is very tough to social distance them, like everyone has stated. In the hallways, it's crowded. In the breakfast line, it's crowded. Outside on the playground, it is crowded. Our custodians have been great. They also come in behind us, and they use their ionizing guns, and they spray the tables. They spray the playground equipment once a day for us. What really works is we have a lot of staff there to help us. So we always have staff wiping down after every rotation. We rotate like 6 times in the day. So every time the kids come out, we go in, we wipe, and they move to their next station. And when they're done, we wipe again. And it is very time consuming. But the kids, they have adjusted well. They know it as routine. It took about 3 to 4 days to get it to where they were pretty good at it. They know what's expected of them, and they are doing fairly well with it. For the mask part, they are adjusting well. We don't have too many people that take their mask off. We let them know if you need to breathe or something, or you need help, you can pull down your mask and take your nose out for a minute and take a breath of fresh air, and then they put it right back up. We have a few kids that like to suck on their masks, unfortunately, but for the most part, they are doing great. The parents are good about bringing their mask. I would say about 50% of the students do bring their own mask every day. For the ones that don't, we do have fresh, clean masks for them at the school. We are worried about students that do bring their own mask, just like the laundering issue. How clean is that going to be? Is it going to get washed daily? Is it going to get washed weekly? We do have those concerns with our students that we work with. Let's see. Just the teaching aspect of it, like when we are in our classroom learning, it is really hard to hear the students. And you can read body language for so long, but I find that the students become disengaged sooner than they normally would. They don't have your mouth to watch or anything. If you're trying to make a joke with them, they don't get it anymore. They just kind of look at you with a blank stare. And so it has been difficult. And especially for those quiet kids, you cannot hear them through the mask, but.
I'd like to add that it was nice that we were able to utilize the hallway in order to social distance the kids to do the online work. It's really helpful that we have a device, nearly 1 device per child, because then we're not immediately running back to the device every time there's a shift because there's a new kid getting on the device. So it definitely helps if you can assign devices to kids without having to share. That cuts down on one person having to sanitize all the different laptops every time the kids are turning around or switching to a different activity. And we've gotten very good at sanitizing, like Casey pointed out. The kids will automatically hold hands out to you to get hand sanitizer when they're walking by you, if we're going through any kind of transition. So they've figured out the routine. I would echo what Casey says. It's hard to understand the little ones that are quiet, when you can't see their lips. And teachers have to be loud enough to be clear, I think, is probably a good way to put it.
Casey, anything else?
Let's see. Oh, just the whole water bottle and drinking fountain thing. The kids not being able to use the water fountain or anything like that. We've been providing disposable bottles that we throw away we recycle it every day, but that's costly. The kids, they get very thirsty, especially when they're outside or just throughout the day. I'm concerned about their intake of water while we are at school, if we have to keep closing off drinking fountains and things like that. That's about what I have.
Thank you. Dan, how about you from a high school perspective? Maybe give a rundown of the number of students, hours, and so on and so forth. Your mute's on.
Sorry, I hate Zoom. Okay, so I'm Dan Barch. We're running a summer school program. We're bringing in so far we've brought in about 210 kids. We have 10 students per classroom. We bring them in 15-minute increments in the morning for a morning session for 5 classes. Then we repeat that in mid-morning, and then we repeat that in an afternoon session. I would just concur. We're doing the same things that all the other programs are doing. We do a temperature check. Any morning at Lincoln Center, you can come down and watch us line everybody up. And then we bring them in. I've got a wonderful staff of people that are really excited to work with kids again. It's been a challenge, but we have such a great staff and we've got so much space that it's easy to socially distance kids. I would tell you that the masking issue was an issue in June, but the moment the directive went out that Lincoln Center was all masked, that everybody in the building was masked where they were going to schools, the kids would leave school and try to take their masks off early, but the moment the masking directive went out, every kid keeps his mask on the whole time in the building. I haven't had, a single kid that I catch on the stairs, kind of taking his mask off a little early. We've had great attendance. I don't think I've ever seen a summer school program. I've worked in summer school for 25 years because I'm dangerous with a lot of free time. And so I've always been in summer school, and I don't think we've had this good of attendance. In the 25 years that I've worked, kids are anxious to get some sort of structure back in their day. That's really where we're at. We've had a 1-to-1 ratio with technology, so we have it pretty good in the classroom, and the way we're doing things, I think, is just a testimony to the professionals and to BPS staff for giving us, some space to work with kids and some flexibility down at Lincoln Center, because I know we invade their space every summer.
Thanks, Dan. So I'll stop there and just open it up for trustees who may have questions for these individuals. And then after that, I'll walk through the basics of the reopening plan.
Greg, this is Jennifer. Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
The kids are ecstatic to be back. And I say that because I think that's a point. I understand all the health issues here. I'm not pushing one way or another. I just think it's really important to point out that they're very happy to be back with a little bit of sense of normalcy and amongst their friends and in a learning environment.
Thank you.
Questions from the board?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Raffiani.
So I'm asking both in terms of the elementary and we have a middle school versus high school levels for each of these, kind of just basic fact-finding questions. And then obviously, I guess we're going to need to have you extrapolate from your experience this summer to what it would be like at an actual school as opposed to in a more structured circumstance like you have right now. So first and foremost, when you're doing the temperature checks and the background questioning, so background checks, Have you been exposed to somebody, that sort of thing. About how long is that adding to getting the kids into school and around, that sort of thing?
About 5 minutes for the high school kids. We're doing the COVID form on a daily questionnaire on a Google form. And so we remind kids to answer that truthfully. And then I review all the Google forms and I kind of catch up with kids, because sometimes they misanswer the questions. Sometimes my staff misanswer them. And they're like, okay, so is someone sick at your house? And they're like, no one's sick at our house. I just read yes or no wrong, that sort of thing. And then we do have, some kids are like, oh, I think I have it, and it's, then we call parents and we just talk to them.
Trustee Raffiani, that's a great question. And here with the elementary summer program at Newman, now granted, we don't have as many students as we would during the normal school year. So the temperature checks with just a quick forehead scanner, that does, as Dan mentioned, that doesn't take much time at all. It can be done fairly quickly. The questioning now, after the first couple weeks, the parents have been great about just kind of coming to us and saying, as representing their student, we're healthy, everything's good, not exposed. And with that, we've had a couple of situations where we've had some students who were sick, siblings in this case, and the parents took it upon themselves. Now, granted, this might not happen every time, but they did call and let us know, and they kept their students out of the program on their own and informed us that was happening. So I do think there's a sense of awareness, and again, that partnership with parents, that they've been working with us and letting us know if they feel like someone's been exposed or is sick.
So I guess thank you for all of that. And related to that, and I'm trying not to ask the same questions over and over again, but so not just in additional time, but is there an added amount of staff that's needed in order to accomplish this? And also not just the temperature and the background checks, but the masking, the hand washing, and I'm thinking elementary versus high school, and I'm not implying either is more difficult than the other.
I think for our group, because we've got about 45, maybe 15 seconds per kid when they're coming in to do that quick temperature check and ask the families. Like Joe said, they're in the routine of it, so they know what we're going to ask and they know what to look for. We have had a family member come and get their child because they found out that an extended family member tested positive and they had a minimal exposure. So they came and got their child and didn't bring the child back until they got that negative result. So the parents are being mindful. So in regard to in my opinion, in regard to the putting on the mask, taking the temperatures, I don't see necessary extra staff for that kind of thing. Wiping down and hand sanitizing, passing that out for the younger kids, it requires extra people and work.
I would concur. We've got a great student to kid ratio right now. So I've got 2 people out front that are helping socially distance and doing temperature checks so the teachers can be ready and preparing in their classrooms. So that's 2 additional professionals that I don't usually have at summer school. So we're really benefiting from that. And we're only bringing in, 50 kids at a time. So with a big high school opening, it's going to be all hands on deck.
I can speak to that. We being Mr. Felton, Dr. Koo, and our executive team that's in the reopening, Ms. Koch and Mr. Russell, the temperature screening is inconclusive at this time. In fact, it can create bottlenecks and people becoming too close together. So in the reopening plan at this point in time, we won't be doing temperature checks or the questions that are being asked now. The one thing we do have to give ourselves permission with as we look at the planning is things are subject to change depending on if the science or research changes. But we talked extensively about the temperature screening and the validity of the screening itself in comparison to the amount of time. And I think what I'm going to ask everyone to do as we approach this major challenge, there are gives and takes and priorities in all of this. We feel that as you hear the administrators and the teachers in the programs, we feel that by empowering the home to do their part, their job, which we are developing procedures for them to watch very closely, that we can obtain the same type of objective that we would want. But as of right now in the reopening plan, there is not a plan to temperature check as we open school.
And I appreciate that you were going to be speaking to all of this, Superintendent Upham, when you actually present the plan itself. I think that I was asking these questions, getting these exact kind of answers, because you hear, well, it only adds 15 seconds, but we only had 50 kids instead of 2,000. And I think having a little bit of this information when we then hear your plan might also help keep it in perspective when hearing the decisions that you made, or at least are considering so far. And so I just have a couple of more quick questions. I think these are for Casey, now that I see that she's got her camera back on. So with regard to things like detracting from communicating due to the mask wearing, for example, are there any low-tech solutions that we know of, like maybe some for teachers to have? There are going to be clear masks that can be made available maybe by the fall. We might not be able to get them out to all children, but teachers maybe. Or is there some other use of technology that's not that's a little bit more robust, like say a microphone for either the teachers or the I don't know if that's the sort of thing that can be passed around, obviously, but are there any technological solutions that might reduce the detraction from that? And ultimately, with I heard everybody say how much they benefited from access to one-to-one technology for the computers, for example. Clearly, for communicating, that might be a solution, since if we did have the one-to-one, because a kid could, some children anyway, could type answers rather than having to speak them, that sort of thing. Have you any thoughts as to how we might improve things going forward, given your experiences? And yes, I ask questions that are that long for a profession.
Working with the younger kids, I don't see typing an answer being a reasonable solution for that. But I do think clear face guards would be better, especially in the younger grades, for the students and for the staff. I don't know how good they are at stopping germs from getting out, but I think that would be a better option for those younger guys, most definitely.
Trustee Raffiani, we are exploring masking, if you will, face coverings that we can see through. We have received and are looking at different types of masking, and so yes, the answer is yes. We don't know how well they'll work, but they are available. In fact, I have one on my table right now. So we will try and place them into our summer programs and let them see if they're going to work.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Leo.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Again, thank you all for pursuing the summer programs. It's, I'm sure, very valuable for the kids who participated. Although, we don't know as much as we should know about the virus. One of the things we do know is that being outside is a much less risky environment than being in an enclosed room. So I'd like to know if any of you experimented over the summer with outdoor classroom settings and what that was like.
Trustee Leo, I can speak a little to that, not in an outdoor classroom setting, but our kindergartners that are coming in, part of the hope with the program is to get them used to school. And we've talked to you before about the Jumpstart program. And so they do spend time outside getting used to recess and transitioning inside. So we try to utilize that. I mean, the teachers certainly could do some instruction outside as well with the weather being nice. So I think that's a good possibility and something to explore. One of the challenges to bring up, and I'm glad you mentioned that, I wanted to speak to that in terms of outside. So the students aren't required to wear their masks outside, yet that's where we find, I think, as Jennifer mentioned, where they tend to be the most attracted to each other. So they're playing their games and they're playing side by side, and so they're very close in proximity, yet they don't have their masks on because we're outside. So another thing that popped up, just bringing out all the things that we're seeing, is some of the little kindergartners that are coming in are so adamant about wearing their mask and following the rules that they won't take them off when they get outside. They're no, I need to keep my mask on, which is great, except for the fact then we have a challenge for them in terms of it's hard for them as they get running around to breathe and have that, that's a reality that we're facing. So we have to, tell them it's okay, you can take your mask off. So that's just what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis in terms of when the little ones are outside.
We did both. We've done some art lessons, cultural art lessons outside. And then we've also done, we're doing science. So we've done several science experiments outside. The kids prefer being outside. That's just a reality. One of the things we've discovered is a little bit problematic is kids will be running outside and they've forgotten that they have their mask on. So they want to take it off and hand it to the teacher. Well, that defeats the purpose of trying to keep sanitized, or teachers handling every kid's mask. So we've used Ziploc bags. We just open the Ziploc bag and the kid drops the mask in the bag and it has their name on it. That way, if we're holding on to those masks, they're not all mixed in together.
Trustee Leo, in the reopening guide, I will be emphasizing outdoor instruction and giving permission, in fact, encouraging all staff to explore outdoor instruction. I also reached out to Chief St. John and requested an increased presence, not out of fear, but just out of additional support, if need be, in conjunction with our school resource officers, because we are up against school safety. But again, these are gives and takes and trade-offs that we all have to be aware of. But I compliment your thinking. We can use the weather to our advantage, and we can go outside and do outside instruction. And we have incredibly creative people. And in the case in our elementaries specifically, we can ask for parent volunteers, even though we are going to be what I'm going to term a restrictive mode opening. But if we do need adult support or PTA supervision in outdoor instructional areas, it's an area that we can continue to explore and I think expand upon.
Any other questions from the board?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Ms. Hoffman?
Reason why we are using so much hand sanitizer over hand washing. I understand the logistics and it's much faster, but hand washing with soap and water seems to be much better. And I'm not a fan of hand sanitizer at all, so I'm just curious on the thinking behind sanitizing over hand washing.
Actually, we're doing both. Whenever the kids are going to the restrooms, when they're coming out, we're asking them, did you use soap? Did you wash well? They're doing it 4 or 5 times a day. So we're doing both. And so the sanitizer is really being used just from transition from one spot to another. But if they're going to lunch, if they're coming in from outside, there's a lot of hand washing that is going on also. The other thing that, and this is in addition to what you're asking, we've got like 8 hand sanitizer stations, standalone stations that we've put in the school. So when the kids come in, they're immediately going to the hand sanitizer if they're moving from place to place. So to answer your question, it's not one in lieu of another. It's basically double down efforts on both ends, at least for our programming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
This is an opportune time to say this. We need to be careful, very careful, that we don't interject unneeded fear into our students about these types of things. We have to be very balanced in our approach and very controlled in our approach, so that we don't want students thinking they're going to get in trouble if they don't do something specifically, or if they infect someone else, or those types of situations, we have to stay calm in this and teach it calmly, and then just address it appropriately, so that it becomes, as Ms. Smith said, a norm or a routine. I have some concerns about going over the top with this and creating unneeded anxiety, just from something that can be traced as normal. So that's a point. It's an overarching point for all of us, because students are in their formative years, and because instruction is so effective, that we take that into consideration at every turn possible.
Kids reflect what they see and what they feel from the adults around them. I've been very fortunate to have a staff that is good about explaining things without being emotionally over the top, or intervening in a fear-based manner. From what I can tell, and Casey, you can provide your perspective on this, they just get that it's a routine that we've really amped up, and it's a little annoying to them, but they're used to being told, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And so, again, yep, sorry, we need you to do it again. So from what I've seen, there's no fear base there. The only little bit of hesitation or fear that I saw was on the very first day, when they didn't understand at first why we were doing what we're doing. And after having a couple of discussions with us about that, I have not seen it become an issue again.
I haven't seen any fear based at all. The kids just do it. They don't even really talk about COVID anymore. It's just, it is what it is anymore.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you very much for your input and for your support of our kids in the teaching and learning. Thank you so much. Greg, were you going to talk about the ongoing discussion on opening schools next?
I would, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to state the obvious. First off, thank you everyone for participating. I think your information is extremely critical. I want to state the obvious. When we start school on August 24th with traditional live instruction, we're not going to have the teacher to student ratio that's being explained here. I fully get that. This is not a trick. This was an idea, or a sharing of information. We will have to take more extensive efforts because we will have more students in the classrooms. So I want to walk through this. I'm going to restate this again. We need to challenge all of us to find the breakthroughs versus identifying the barriers. That's critical. We need to shift the mindset into looking for solutions. First off, on the safety requirements, and I have John Felton on, and we have gone through these extensively. And I want to reiterate how important this is. Sometimes we just pass it off because we keep hearing it, and we just pass it off to, oh, I've heard that before. But we can function as long as we follow these three primary rules, and they're very, very real. Face coverings. The research and the action of wearing face coverings is very, very effective to controlling the source. That's the term that's used, to control the source. We need our community to help us with this. We need the virus to settle itself back down again. Face coverings work, and they work very well. Do not dismiss that. Physical distancing, and you're going to hear me use a term that I picked up in the Academy of Pediatrics, cohorting. And we had this, I gave this challenge to our building administrators before they left. Look at your building and begin to build cohorts. Cohorts that interact with each other and not with others to the best of your ability. So physical distancing, you hear me not say social distancing. I've said it, physical social distancing in schools is an extremely difficult, if not an oxymoron, but we don't have a choice in some of this. physical distancing and cohorting of school groups. Our administrators hopefully have been working on that from the time we got out of school. And the second is hand hygiene. The safety requirements, face coverings work. Physical distancing and cohorting will help immensely, and hand hygiene will also help. So at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Felton to come on and just talk about where we are in the community currently with the virus, and then the assistance that he is assisting us as a school district with as far as the plan that we're ready to walk out. So Mr. Felton.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to come back and talk to you all again. As the superintendent said, we've spent a lot of time together, and we've had a lot of other experts in education and healthcare involved as well. Before I kind of get into some of the stuff we've talked about, let me just share with you some what I think are some key underpinnings that we need to keep in mind. And this is something I've said a lot of different times, but I think it's really important as you go through this process of, as superintendent says, finding breakthroughs, not barriers. Everything related to COVID-19 is essentially a risk management exercise. So let's talk about what's on the two extreme ends. On one end, if we could lock everybody in their house for 60 days and nobody came out for 60 days, this thing would be over. That can't happen. That's not the world we live in. The other extreme is if we just said, go get them, just live the life you lived, and do the stuff you did in the same size groups you did and the same level of compression that you did, we'd have tons more disease than we currently do. So on one end, though, if we go back to the lock everybody down, that is not a risk-free undertaking. The risks that you create with that level of lockdown or shutdown, if you will, are, it's better from the disease spread perspective, but you create all sorts of risk related to the loss of social connectedness. We saw early on the economic implications of that. We know that during that period of time, calls to suicide prevention lines more than doubled. We saw alcohol sales increase pretty dramatically. At the same time, we saw domestic violence complaints increase, and CPS referrals went down by 40%, which is largely because the kids weren't with you, they weren't in your schools. So we have to understand that there is no risk-free option here, and in many cases, we have to decide which of those risks we can tolerate. We sort of titrate them back and forth. So the more we move towards more openness and more what we're used to, we increase the risk of the spread of disease, and we decrease those social, economic, and psychological risks. As we move more towards lockdown, we decrease the risk of the spread of disease, but we add to those social, psychological, and economic risks. So what we've really tried to talk about is how do we balance that? So I do think it's important to understand, even as we focus on finding ways to get things done, there are no risk-free options here. If someone's really looking for what is the perfect option that eliminates all risk, it doesn't exist in the COVID-19 world. So we're going to have some tolerance for what of that we can accept. The basic premises of dealing with COVID-19 are, quite frankly, and this is said, I heard on a news program this morning, I've used the word myself, it's boring. You know, we'd all love to have the magic pill that just made it all go away. It'd be great to have a vaccine that made it all go away. What we really have is wash your hands, watch your distance, and wear a mask. Those are not exciting, but they are the intervention of choice to prevent the disease. As we look at the population that you're dealing with, physical distancing is clearly going to be a challenge for a number of reasons. One is you have little kids. Little ones love to hug. They love to hold their buddies' hands. They love to run around together. Older kids are, they like their socialization. They like that sense of being part of the group. I do think, and to me, this is more than just semantics, but there's a significant perceptual difference between the idea of social distancing and the idea of physical distancing. Social distancing, I believe, carries much more risk because we're saying you can't interact socially. Physical distancing says we can still interact socially, we just need to do it in a little different way. And I don't think that's just semantics. I think particularly when you're talking about kids, we need to make sure that we have opportunities for them to interact socially, because that is a huge risk area for the population that you all serve. So yes, we need to build distance in. Another thing that I think is really critical, and we've talked a lot about this, is everything that we talk about, and we've had a number of conversations, including 2 in the last two days. You really should, in your mind, put somebody out there's an English teacher will tell me I have the wrong word or the wrong phrase, but an introductory clause. And that introductory clause is, to the extent possible, comma, these are things we're going to do. Because many of these things, you've got children, right? It's going to be really hard. Like we heard some of the challenges with masking, and then over time the kids get used to it. I've got a grandson who's not even 2. He'll be 2 in October. And when he goes out, he does this. Because he knows he wants to put his mask on, even though you're not supposed to put on our 2-year-olds. He wants a mask because the people around him wear a mask. But he doesn't necessarily get over his nose, his mouth, and firmly attached to both sides. So to the extent possible, masking is important, but it's going to take some time. We've talked a lot about the screening, and this again becomes sort of this trade-off. We could line up all the kids in school, and it's one thing to think about kids coming into an elementary school. Think about potentially 2,000 kids at one of the high school. Lining them all up to get their temperature taken creates a whole different risk, right? Because now you've compressed them in a line for an extended period of time, and there's not great evidence that it's terribly helpful. What you can use though is what's called subjective fever. We all know what it feels like to be feverish, especially once you have older kids. We know what it feels like to have a fever. So the question is, do you feel feverish? Do you feel that feeling? And that is another way of getting around that. We've talked about transportation. Kids are used to getting on a bus and going to wherever they want to sit. Assigned seating means that it takes us back to the superintendent's concept of cohorting. If we know that all the kids sit in the same place every day, if one of them gets sick, we know who's around them. And for contact tracing purposes, that's really important for all of this cohorting idea. Is if we've got a group of kids that are sitting, they're a group that studies together or works together. If one of them becomes ill, that's a much smaller group to deal with than if they're interacting with the entirety of the school. So a lot of these are pretty basic concepts, and you're always going to get back to this question of to the extent possible. We talked about what if you've got the 8th grader who really should be in an AP course in the high school. That breaks the cohort, right? That says, gosh, now we're going to introduce this 8th grader into this high school group. The offset to that is, do we want to sacrifice some degree of educational opportunity at the risk of putting that kid into breaking up the cohort? So all those need to be in our mind. I think I've told you before, I take a very broad view of public health. An element of public health is the health status of a community. And right now, on health status, we are struggling. You've all seen the numbers, the number of new cases every day. I said last week, and actually I used language that came from the state health department, that Yellowstone County is the epicenter of the pandemic in Montana right now. We have about 40% of the active cases in the state. We've got the largest number of cases total. We have the largest number of deaths. I mean, there's some things that tell us that we're kind of struggling. Overall, Montana is far better than almost every other state. Part of the reason these numbers seem so large is our numbers were so small for a long time. Our positivity rate for testing is under 2% overall. We've definitely had some outbreaks. We all know the tragedy of the Canyon Creek Memory Care Facility. 12 of our 17 deaths in the county, sadly, are residents of that facility. So there are some things that tell us that clearly we're dealing with outbreak, but there's some nuance to it that goes beyond just the raw numbers. We worked together to figure out how we could do graduation, and we made it through graduation without outbreaks linked to that. I think, I told Greg this, I think the idea of doing these summer programs on a small scale was brilliant. That's about the only opportunity that you as a school district have to pilot test some things. If this was back in March, you couldn't pilot test because we had to get through it, but you've tested some things, you've learned some stuff, and that will help inform how we go forward. The idea that we can use the best knowledge from public health, the medical profession, and education to come up with a plan, I think is really the very best that we can do. Is it perfect? No. Will it limit all your risk? No. Will some people be less comfortable with the choices? Absolutely. But I guess the thing I'd say in closing is something I said for many times, and that is we need to understand that in the world of COVID-19 that we live in right now, we are not in a position of choosing the optimal option. The optimal options simply don't exist. So what we're left with is how do we take all these bits of knowledge and understanding and identify what is the best option? And in some cases, that's, like look at testing right now, the options are pretty bad, but we're doing the best we can with what's available. I think in this case of school, we're trying to strike this balance of safety and education and academic achievement and socialization, and families are dependent upon your schools for food and social support and safety. All those things need to go into the mix, and none of them are going to be perfect. There's that old saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. So I think we're really trying to figure out what the good is. And the last thing I'd say is, I think something else that Superintendent Upham said that's really critical is, that there's an old military saying that no battle plan ever survives the first encounter with the enemy. This will evolve. This plan will evolve based on what we learn early on. This plan will evolve based on how our community's circumstances change. It'll evolve based on, do we get a vaccine? There's lots of factors here. So I would just encourage us to be flexible, approach this as an ongoing learning experience. And I think if we take that approach, we will come up with a good plan and a better plan as time goes by.
Thank you, Mr. Felton. Before we release you, a more pragmatic component to the reopening, and I know there are going to be a lot of questions about this. We've discussed this extensively. This is also a moving component to the reopening plan. I'd like to address testing. Some of our people, I think, believe we can test our way out of this. Maybe, probably not. So could you please address the question about surveillance testing, and then the testing that would go if a student or teacher or someone in the home tested positive for COVID.
Okay. So let's start with surveillance testing. Surveillance testing has a particular epidemiological purpose, and that's to understand what's going on in the community at a point in time. And so what you do is you pick subpopulations of the general population, and you just test a bunch of folks, and you find out, do they have the virus? There are some significant challenges to doing surveillance testing right now. The biggest one is the time it takes to get a result. So you may have heard Governor Bullock speaking last Wednesday. The lab that we were sending our surveillance tests to from Montana is so overwhelmed, they've said they won't take any more tests of asymptomatic people. Asymptomatic without symptoms are who use surveillance tests. it was at first it was 7 to 10 days, then it was 10 to 14 days to get a result, and then it was 14 to 20 days, and really now we can't even give an estimate because it's so far out. So it's not terribly useful if you don't have any results. Right? If the results are so far out that you're getting, if you're looking for a snapshot and you're getting results back over a 2 to 3 weeks later over a 1 or 2 week period, it's not very helpful in saying what was going on when you did the testing. So at this point, actually, surveillance testing is essentially out because there's nowhere to send those tests. So then we come down. Who else is left? So you have people who are symptomatic. As I think most of you probably know, the symptoms that have been tied to COVID-19 are pretty widespread. First, all we talked about was fever, cough, and shortness of breath. That's pretty much all we talked about. Then we added, well, there's some digestive systems and vomiting and diarrhea. There's loss of taste and smell. There's headaches. There's body aches. The list kind of goes on and on. It's a viral disease, and that kind of is the stuff that goes with those. So the list gets pretty long. And so when you start testing anyone who's symptomatic, those are a higher priority. They come back quicker, but even that number now it's stretching out. It used to be we got almost all symptomatic tests back the next day. Now sometimes it can be 2 or 3 days before we get results. And then the last group is what about contacts? People are identified as close contacts. If they're asymptomatic, we don't recommend testing. If they're symptomatic, we do recommend testing. And again, it just takes a little while to get it. I think so the testing is just a function of throughput right now. We do have the test kits. There's a risk of those getting a little short. Right now, we're doing okay. There's not enough test kits to do the rapid testing. I was on a call with Senator Daines and the 2 hospital CEOs and some other folks last Monday, and that was the thing the hospital CEOs are mentioning is they don't have enough reagents to test kits for the rapid test. So testing is just muddled right now. I think the bigger issue, and this is a call that I get multiple times a day, and it goes something like this. I know someone who is tested positive, and I'm a contact to him. What do I do? First thing, we need to make sure we understand what a contact is. So in COVID land, according to the CDC, a close contact, someone that we would put into quarantine, a close contact is someone who had a sustained encounter, 15 minutes or more continuously, with a person known to be positive within 6 feet or less. 6 feet or less, 15 minutes or more. So a brief interaction, even with someone who was positive, is not. We wouldn't consider that a close contact. It's got to be sustained. And then there's a time frame on top of that. So we begin to look at who is your close contact up to 48 hours before you became symptomatic. So part of the challenge is employers and family members, they want to do something. And so it's, where can I get tested? Well, first of all, we need to make sure you should get tested. There is a process that public health goes through when someone is positive. There's a case investigation. It's a very extensive interview that identifies close contacts by the definition. Those those contacts then are called and they're placed into quarantine. To differentiate quarantine and isolation, the easy mnemonic is you isolate the ill, the 2 I's with it, and you quarantine the well. So if I'm diagnosed with COVID-19, I'm in isolation until I recover. If you're my close contact, you're in quarantine for at least 14 days. Now, if you go and get tested while you're in quarantine and it's negative, you're still in quarantine. You don't get to get out early because you need that full 14 days to determine if you're going to become sick. So people feel this need to do something. Should we test everybody? Well, if they're asymptomatic, it's going to be 3 or 4 weeks before you get a result anyway, so it doesn't help. Should we close things down? Should we close down businesses or classrooms? No, we need to understand who the contacts are. In your school setting, that's the value of cohort. If we're going to have contacts, we want to have a small number, not if you intermix the groups, then essentially everybody sort of contacts each other. So right now, what we would do if, let's say you were in class and we had a similar situation over the summer where someone becomes, a family member becomes diagnosed, and then the student is a household member of that family member. That student would get put into quarantine, so it wouldn't be at school. The kids that contacted that student, those are contacts of contacts. As we say, that's like a third cousin twice removed. So those other kids who are contacts of contacts don't need to be taken out of school. They don't need to stay home. You've got good systems in place for hygiene, distancing to the extent possible, and masking. And so we would keep those kids in school. If one of those children becomes ill, then we'd figure out which of their classmates were close contacts, and they'd be placed in quarantine. So it really is what you I'm going to encourage you not to do, that I know some organizations try to do, is let's write our own policy for who gets isolated, who gets quarantined, and who gets tested. And I'm going to encourage you not to do that. It's a little more nuanced than that, and it's better to let public health manage that and help with those decisions.
Mr. Felton.
We obviously have an outbreak in Yellowstone County. What do you feel is the link to the outbreak, the cause of the outbreak?
So some of those cases we have been able to track down to particular things. We haven't. We're a little overwhelmed right now, so it's a little tough to do analysis. We're doing some analysis of this. We have found a number of cases linked to family type events, weddings, barbecues, birthday parties, those kinds of things where people kind of tend to let their guard down because it's family. We found some linked to workplaces. So a number of people in one workplace become ill. Again, with the governor's order of masking in workplaces, that should help. And then we've also found some related to transportation. So people who ride the same bus or people who carpool or things like that. The big concern about, what about large events? Thus far, we have not identified anything tied to larger events. That doesn't mean they haven't happened. It just hasn't come through that we've had something as, if you think back way to the beginning of this, one of the first really clear outbreaks was a Board of Regents meeting in March. And that became clear because people all over the state, when they were doing that case investigation, said, well, during that period of time, I was at the Regents meeting. We haven't seen that with large events thus far. Again, it doesn't mean we won't, but many of these things are tied to what I consider the big three: family events, workplace, and transportation.
Have you seen any linkages with out-of-state travelers?
That tends to fall into the family stuff. So we do have, yes, we've had some that have some linkage to people out-of-state people who have come into Montana. Also bear in mind that now we've got a lot of Montanans who are going on vacation and going elsewhere and potentially being exposed elsewhere. It's a viral disease is a little bit different than going through the process, say, of a foodborne illness outbreak, because people have so many interactions. It's a little more difficult than like I ate some particular food and I became ill. But yeah, we think travel has something to do with it. If you go back and look at what happens to our case counts in the 2 to 3 weeks following June 1st. So June 1st was the start of phase 2, which is bigger groups, more businesses open, more activity, and also the ending of the interstate travel quarantine. 2 to 3 weeks after that, so like the third week of June or so, second to third week, is when you start seeing the increase, which is we predicted, knowing how big it would be, but it pretty much ties from a timing perspective to the end of phase 1 and the end of the interstate travel.
Thank you.
Greta, I have a question.
From Jana Hafer.
Mr. Felton, are you familiar with these face shields that have a headband and then a face shield? What is your opinion of those for instead of a mask, because you could see the kids and the teacher's face? What do you think about those?
Yeah, so we actually had that conversation this morning with the executive team from the school district and Dr. Koo and I. We in healthcare we would typically not use the face shield alone. Face shield is primarily to protect the eyes from infection. We would typically use a mask with a face shield. So if our staff were seeing patients, we would do both. To some extent, it's sort of a barrier, right? So you try and block droplets that might come in or droplets that might be expelled, but it's not anywhere near as effective. I think one of the things that we talked about was it may be more useful to figure out how to build distance into the classroom and let that teacher be a little bit farther away than to just put the teacher in a face shield. It doesn't provide that much protection, really.
Okay, thank you.
Again, it's mainly intended to protect the eyes.
Any other questions before Greg goes on?
Thank you, Mr. Felton. And as far as the reopening plan is concerned around the COVID question, that's why I asked it. Each situation becomes fairly unique. We'll have a series of operating procedures that our school nurses will put into action. And basically what we will do is we will refer the scenario to the public health officials, and they will guide us from there. We are prepared to offer what we're considering sick areas to isolate that individual until a parent or guardian can get them and then share with us the information. What's going to be extremely important in this is the parents' homework is they have to update their contact information, and they also have to make alternative plans for their child to be picked up or held in a certain area other than school. Now, I will share this with parents. It is imperative that you update your contact information so that we can contact you immediately, and that in the case a child becomes ill and they're at work or cannot get them, that someone come to the school immediately. That being said, better than that is the other part of the homework for the parent is to do the screening at home prior to, and do not allow sick children to come to school. We will be very clear on that for obvious reasons. The same goes for staff and faculty. We pride ourselves as Americans of coming to work because we're tough. That can't happen anymore. And we are working to assist students with attendance. We will make a COVID-only code, but we plan on working with attendance and also working with our employees on what that looks like. There's nothing conclusive with employees yet, and I'll touch on that later in this discussion about the HR pieces and where we are in the conversations with that. But again, the homework for the parents is, please update your contact information so that it's current. Make sure that if it changes, if cell phones change or they're lost or whatever that may be, that information needs to be updated immediately. And then make alternate plans for a student to go somewhere in the case that child is ill or needs to be picked up. So we would ask that. That's a very important piece to this. Okay, Madam Chair, am I free to move on?
Any other questions from the board before Greg continues?
Okay, I'm going to hit roughly 6 areas. And as I said, I'm requesting a single topic standalone board meeting, hopefully next week, that has all of the detail built into it. There is an extensive amount of information that we've worked to simplify that I want to get out and then take feedback and questions as we move through a working document. This document obviously will be a live document. So number one was safety requirements. I want to cover that again. Face coverings will be required. Okay, that being said, I'm going to use a term called a zero tolerance policy. Zero tolerance policies say this: if you do this, then this happens. It takes common sense out of the situation. We understand that there will be situations and scenarios where children may not be able to wear face coverings. They may have sensory issues. They may have breathing issues. They may have certain situations that require individual attention. We are fully aware of that. So we will not activate zero tolerance policies. We are going to work within this. So please know that. I know there have been questions on Facebook Live. What if my child can't wear a face covering? They have the breathing disorder, or they have this. We will work with that. What does that mean? I don't know. We don't have all the answers, but please know that there's flexibility within the plans that we have. That's extremely important. Will we be lenient in areas? No, we won't, but we will use common sense and good judgment, follow the science to do that. The physical distancing and cohorting, we'll do the best that we can with that. And then the hand hygiene, I appreciate, Jen, your concept of let's wash hands and use less disinfectant. I think that's a good idea. We will have sick areas. We talked about the COVID areas. I'll go into much more detail when we have our special meeting. Number two, restrictive mode of operation. When we open school, we will be in a restrictive mode, meaning that essential workers only will be allowed in and out. Now, does that mean, again, I'm going to go back to the zero tolerance policy. Does that mean a parent can't come get their child? No, that doesn't mean that. Does it mean that we're going to have an open house? No, we will not. Does that mean that we're going to have large assemblies or assemblies? No, we won't do that. Will we invite guest speakers in? No, we won't do that. Will we allow field trips to go outside? Probably not. There have been some scenarios that have been shared with me that we can probably protect the cohorting, and if we can protect the cohorting and still maintain a safe environment, we will entertain that. Okay? So the point that I'm making in all of this, some of it's obvious, some of it isn't, but we will use intelligence and work through these issues. So as far as the restrictive mode, that's going to be a governing component that's overarching the entire district. Now, you can ask me about activities. What about activities? Well, again, there are trade-offs in all of this, so I will address that. But as far as the day-to-day operations of the school district, we will open in a restrictive mode, essential workers only, no large gatherings, field trips, open houses, guest speakers, assemblies, all of that type of situation for obvious reasons. Now, three, the big one, the instructional models. We worked extensively, hours and hours and hours, watching and learning from this. And so we're going to walk out with two instructional models. Number one, the remote learning, standalone remote learning. I authorized adding a remote learning administrator to oversee the program. We may have to add two. Well, let's talk about that. Due to the stark increase in the number of cases that came forward in the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot more interest in remote learning. Prior to that, it was fairly quiet. We hadn't planned on offering a standalone at the time. Now, mind you, the planning attached to COVID, a perfect example of planning for COVID would be to look back at the planning for graduation. Graduation 1.0, absolutely no graduation at all. Graduation 2.0, virtual graduation. Graduation 3.0, small group in the auditoriums. Graduation 4.0, Dela Stadium. Graduation 5.0, larger Dela Stadium. Graduation 6.0, Metra. I'm telling you, in planning, this is how a lot of this walks itself out. So we initially were thinking about a standalone remote, and then there wasn't what I considered in looking at it in my questioning enough to offer that. And then in the stark increase of numbers prompted the survey. So the survey numbers are of this as I speak. We did some number crunching on Sunday night. This is based on 5,800 responses to the survey. And basically the survey asked one question. It asked more. I'll have Roger go through that. But what we needed to know was the interest in remote learning. Difficult to define remote learning, but we have that in place. So families said, it's hard for me to make that decision because I don't know exactly what remote learning looks like. So we'll explain that. What we had was, as of Sunday evening, we had 5,800 responses. Mind you, we have 17,000. Our official enrollment is right at about 17,600 students. I anticipated that we would probably see about a 70-30 breakdown. 70% live traditional instruction, 30% remote. So what it's at right now is 69% have requested live traditional instruction, and I will explain that, or live instruction, and 31% asking for remote. Another important question that we asked, what we learned from the closure in March, was do you have capable and internet and that's solid and is available at all times? 97.5% of the respondents shared that they had stable internet, which helps. Basically, of the 5,800 people that have filled out the survey, only 45 respondents said they didn't. That's a key piece in this. The other one big question that I was concerned about as far as supplies go on the live instruction side that we asked in this survey was, can you help supply masks or face coverings? And I'm pleased to say that 91.5% of the respondents so far have said that they can supply the face coverings. Now, that being said, we heard Casey say concerns about the laundering and those types of situations. So that has the potential to be a fairly large dollar item, but I'm pleased with that. At this time, Roger, if you would just maybe quickly touch on the statistical data of the remote learning package.
Sure thing. So just to reiterate, the survey went out last Wednesday, was open to the public. And our first question was looking at students in their households, the people responding to the survey, what grade level bands they were in. Was it primary K2, intermediate 3-5, middle school 6-8, or in the high schools for 9 through 12, and then what schools they were actually attached to. So we can kind of do some analysis and see, is it pretty consistent amongst buildings in different parts of town, or different, if they have title status or not. And so we have that information now, and it's going to help us have a guide in planning ahead, I hope. Again, this is an anonymous survey and it was open to the public, so we have to keep that in mind. It's just going to provide us some general information to hopefully make some good decisions. But like Superintendent Upham mentioned, we pulled some of the data as of last night and have over 5,800 responses was what we were looking at. And when we broke down, question 2 was what is your preference for reopening in the fall? There are options where I'm sending my child back to school live on August 24th with specific safety practices consistent with CDC guidelines that will be followed. Students will be socially distanced when feasible. That was one option. And as mentioned earlier, about 69% of respondents selected that as their option. 31% selected that they would like to request remote instruction for their child, and it would be full-time remote learning, and it would look different than what it looked like in the spring. So it'd be more robust and more structured and more consistent. From there, we had some logic play into the survey, So if you answered yes, I would like remote instruction, the next question they received was, do you have consistent internet access to use for schoolwork? And we had a pretty overwhelmingly positive response to that question, with 97.5 or so percentage of households that would request remote instruction would have internet access available. And then for the respondents that selected live instruction beginning on August 24th, would they be able to provide a face covering, and 92% or so would be able to provide that. So that was the survey in summary, and we have looked at the information. When we break it down by K2, the numbers are a little different than the overall district average, maybe by a couple percentage points. So primary, 67% of the respondents selected live instruction, with 33 wanted remote, so 2% different there. In the intermediate, as a district, pretty much the same as what we saw in primary. So 3rd through 5th grade students and families, 67-33. In the middle school, right on par with the district average, 69% requesting live instruction, and 31% preferencing remote learning. And at our high schools, a little different. 71% of the respondents wanted live instruction for their students, and 29% would go with remote learning. So overall, averaging out and looking at the overall response, off the cuff, 70-30 is a kind of a good estimate, I think. And this could change because the survey will remain open till Friday. So there will be more time for responses. One caveat with the survey is it is set up where you can only have one response per device to kind of limit excessive submissions, I guess. So we try to build a little bit of that in there, but it is an anonymous survey and it is open to the public. So we need to keep that in mind as we're looking at the results.
Roger, this is Greta with a quick question. When you looked at, with the survey that you ran, when looking at the high school, could it have been a parent or a student? Did you segregate those in the responses?
We didn't ask that. We just wanted to get a general feel of we're assuming that if you responded, you have a student in your household. That's kind of all we would know, but it would be possible for a student to respond.
So if we look at the numbers and follow the 5,800 responses in conjunction with the 17,600 students, if the 30% holds true, that's roughly remote learning is being requested by right at or a little over 5,000 students. One of the happy parts in this is it's pretty even across the board. So that helps with licensure, appropriate spacing, class size is what I'm trying to say. But when you do the math, that's looking like about 200 plus educators that would be needed to operate the remote instruction. That's a good thing, because the win-win that we're trying to create with this is, one, accommodate students who have COVID-related issues, and that can be extensive. That can be they themselves, that can be a sibling, that can be a member in the household. I took a call from a grandfather who's raising his grandson who has significant health issues and who knows he needs to be in school, live instruction. But the risk, because of the health issues of the grandfather, is significant enough that that is too large of a risk at this point in time. So the spectrum of need is quite great. We also have staff members who are in that same role, whether they have a health issue themselves or they're living with someone who has a health issue. And so what we would try to do with the remote learning is create the win-win and place by priority those that have significant COVID issues, in addition to others who may be requesting for a variety of reasons. Now, as far as the cohorting goes, again, I'm going to bring up the zero tolerance policy. We are going to do our best to allow for flexibility for students who are involved in remote learning to access school in the live format if they have the availability for courses that cannot or would not be offered. An example would be if I need AP Physics or AP Chemistry or vocational ed, something like that, if the risk versus reward allows that, we want to be able to try to make that happen. Okay, that being said, we can't be everything to everyone. We will have to staff by accreditation, class size, licensure, all of that. So as far as students that are involved in remote learning and requesting extracurricular activities, we would like to accommodate that if possible. Now, does that interrupt the cohorting? Well, yes, it can. We don't anticipate that that will be a lot of people, because if it was, they would be in live instruction anyway. Okay, so let's talk about the curriculum. So the curriculum in remote learning right now basically will cover, it'll meet the accreditation and the graduation requirements. It will not be as robust as a live instruction for obvious reasons. Again, we can't do everything for everyone. We do the best of our ability. That's why we've created flexibility and choice. Now, let's talk about how long will you need to commit to it. We would ask that if you choose remote learning, you commit to the year of instruction. It's easier in the planning and the development, because just like in normal school, if I want to go into a different class or if I move to a different school, everything is based on two components. One, the time of the transfer, and two, enrollment availability. We staff and size our classes to the nearest extent possible of accreditation without going over. Is it nice to have smaller class sizes? Of course, if you have the funds to do it. We do have some opportunities with the COVID funding, both from the governor's office and from the federal government, to help us with this. But there are a lot of other issues demanding that funding source, a lot. I consider instruction number 2 and safety number 1. So let's talk about live instruction. We did a lot of extensive conversation and review of live instruction, and I sent out the Face the State Montana interview because I felt that the questions that were being asked were very pertinent to what we were currently going through. The live instruction will mirror a normal school day to the best of our ability. The variables attached to reducing enrollment, which would help with the remote learning, actually complements the day-to-day operation. If we are coming back and learning is one of our top priorities, then we need to do what we do best without shifting and changing, as long as we can provide the safety. We feel that a normal school day is better for our students because it is what we do best, and better for our staff. The amount of anxiety that's being created walking into the beginning of the school year is real. If we alter those schedules and change them, it creates more anxiety. And the trade-off, as far as what we are monitoring now, does not supersede or overshadow a normal school day. And so we will work to offer a normal school day with the 3 guiding principles of face coverings, physical distancing, hand hygiene, disinfecting. Questions on the instructional models. Now, this is a conversation that could last a week to 2 weeks to a year, and I will cover it much more extensively because there are a lot more questions involved. But I'll take a question on that, and then I'd like to cover transportation, activities, and human resources to end this session.
Questions from the board? Russ Hall.
A question. So Greg, I mean, as everyone is saying and will continue to say, thank you and thanks to your staff for putting in so much work and thought into this plan and what it will become. As far as instruction, specifically thinking of remote learning, what will be the mix between, you know, are we going to have synchronous and asynchronous instruction? And, you know, for the purely self-paced, are we going to be creating those instructional materials ourselves, or will we be using a curriculum that already exists?
The last question first. The curriculum we'll be using is our curriculum with our critical concepts, and going from there. The remote platform will be a standalone remote platform, meaning that I'm a teacher who's in charge of third graders that are remote, specific to accreditation standards. As far as the remote instruction within itself, that's yet to be determined on just the creativity and flexibility, but our plan is to have standalone teachers with standalone classrooms attached specifically to remote instruction. Did that answer?
A quick follow-up. It does. Is there a thought or a plan to do, you know, live instruction? Is that the thought that they'll be able to see the teacher and see each other students?
I believe we will do everything we can to provide that within the remote learning plan. That's yet to be determined. People that have more expertise than I do, I'd like to defer that to them to answer that question in the future, but we would want that. We did learn that live teachers with students is the best opportunity.
Right, okay, so I'm assuming a mix. Yeah, that would make the most sense. You can't do all live teaching, but to do it all remote, completely asynchronous is a challenge. So great. Look forward to learning more about that in the future.
Thanks, Russ. Jana Hafer.
Greg, did I understand you that you have to commit to a full year of one or the other? Is that what you said?
That's what we're asking for. It helps in the planning because once you staff this, it's difficult to shift and change after a short period of time. It's impossible, actually.
That's a lot. That's a pretty big commitment. What about if someone goes to live instruction and then is ill? Will they participate in remote learning, or will they just be ill until they can come back?
Well, we would hope the duration of ill in a live classroom is similar to what ill is now, other than COVID, right? They would remain in the live instruction with the teacher using the online platform to instruct, just like we're doing now. Student breaks his leg, student has their appendix out, those types of situations. We've supported that for extended periods of time. That being said, if need be, we possibly could move that student over into remote or homebound, which is a standard operating procedure for us anyway. We operate with homebound quite frequently, actually. So what we don't want to do, and what was communicated very clearly to me through our teachers, and Rachel did a nice job of communicating this, BA president, is we cannot have our teachers teach in a dual platform where half are live and half are remote. It doesn't work for the student, and it surely doesn't work for the teacher. So again, I go back to this. We need to do what we do best. So every decision that we're making on the instructional side models is holding as tight to what we do best as possible.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Raffiani.
So Superintendent Upham, maybe I missed it, but do we have a plan of what happens when a cohort has a positive test or needs to be quarantined?
Yeah, we'll reach out to the county health for that, but we will be able to switch to online learning depending on the extent of the cohort, right? It could be a variety of people. It's one scenario that we haven't completely vetted yet, but I believe we have everything in place to address that.
So if a 10-person pod, if one member is test positive, that pod will be notified and quarantined or something variation on that. And I guess the question I have is, are we going to have one teacher per 10-person pod, or are we still going to have 2 pods per teacher in, say, elementary school and 3 in high school? How are we doing that?
It's probably all of the above. You know, when you talk about the pod, you know, is the pod a cohort that's been together? Well, in different age groups in a high school, that's going to be challenging because the students are going to be changing, right? Maybe it's the 10 students that were in chemistry together. It's hard to say. Or maybe it's the 4th grade classroom. That could happen. If that's the case, then we would teach that as a unit. Depending on how many that is, and we may have to bring in an additional instructor to assist with that. There's many variables that would go forward with that.
And does one of that set of variables that you're planning for include what happens if the entire school has to, or the district has to entirely pivot online, as say MSUB is being told, their staff are being told to be prepared to do?
Yeah, I think you asked the obvious question. You know, could we go back into, maybe I'll use the term the governor used, phase 1? Could we be placed into a phase 1? Well, we very well could, and we would all be in remote. Could be that school, could be a series of schools, could be the district. So we just need to be prepared for whatever comes at us. But we do know that the challenge for instruction is that we have half the class in a live format and half the class in a remote format. That didn't work real well.
Greg, how is this working with dual credit?
Well, it'll be specific. It's a singleton that will probably be offered in live instruction. That being said, you don't know until you build the sections around remote of how many students would fit into a specific area. So again, we're going to try to fit the system to what the need is to the best of our ability.
Madam Chair, sorry.
Oh, just a follow up on that. Are you looking to limit any electives?
Well, if you take 5,000 students out of the system, it's going to alter it in live instruction. Absolutely. Would we be able to offer classes that have 4 students in it? Well, yet to be determined. We don't normally do that. We have an incredible amount of work to go moving forward. We would probably do our best to stay in the 15 student minimum range. I'm talking about high school now because that's predominantly what you're asking me. But if possible, again, an overarching principle to this would be to create as much flexibility as we can, at least through this year. But please remember, we can't do everything for everyone. And so that's just a fact.
Thanks. Any other questions? Joe, did you have a follow-up question?
I do. And I mean, I don't necessarily, I don't want to explore every single subgroup that might have its own issues and make sure that you've planned accordingly for them. I'm going to hope to hear about that from you at some point. But obviously, we start in the classroom with the safety of the children and how we're going to teach them. But does your plan right now also include how we're going to keep the teachers safe too?
Well, be the best situation we can with the teachers is the same thing we're doing with students: face covering, physical distancing to the best of our ability, the cleanliness, the pre-screening at home, limiting, or in our discussion today, or this past week or past 6 months, whatever it is, the idea would be to keep the instructor or inform the instructor to keep a healthy distance in the classroom from the students per se. Much easier said than done. but that will be a challenge. I'll just be honest with you, it will be a challenge. It's not an impossibility, but it will be a challenge. And I think when we open school up, that's why I'm encouraging outdoor instruction as much as possible. It'll allow us in that first, month of school, weather is good in Montana in the fall. It'll allow us to really see kind of where we are with everything.
I gotta say the judges haven't been really down with outside court just yet, but I'm hopeful. Superintendent Upham, so what happens? We can dictate a little differently with regard to our expectations of students than say our employees. But in both the cases of students and our employees, are we going to have any plans, policies, or recommendations with regard to, say, traveling, either inside the state, if there are other places that are hotspots, or outside the state, that sort of stuff? Or how have we come up with anything on that just yet?
We haven't. I did have a meeting with. Are you talking about adults or students or all the above?
All the above. Why make it easy?
Right. So the Montana High School Association comes out with their updated procedures on Wednesday. Maybe Mark can speak to that in a little bit. As far as the adults, there isn't a travel ban. There hasn't been a travel ban. We are working through with HR at this point in time those types of discussions, so I don't have an answer for you on that at this time.
Madam Chair.
Was that Mike?
No, it's
And Scott. Too,
Scott.
so.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. McCullough.
Mike. Did you have a question? Go ahead.
I'll defer to you, Mr. McCullough. I can wait.
Oh, thanks. I'm not interested in an answer tonight, but during our targeted meeting next week, could you touch on FERPA and HIPAA and how that would influence how we communicate with our staff and students? I'd look forward to that in more detail later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Mike Leo.
Yes, Superintendent Upham, would faculty who are at higher risk for the consequences of COVID-19 have the ability to opt into the online instruction model?
Yeah, that's our hope. There are a couple criteria. Obviously, you have to have the appropriate licensure, and skill level would be critical. But we want to do our best to take care of everyone. Yeah, so that's a driving factor in the remote instruction. Standalone remote instruction was to offer some protection and safety for our staff who have COVID health-related issues or COVID-related issues.
Right. And then just to pull back a little bit on a larger level, I'm just curious, has the U.S. Department of Education offered us any supplemental funding for the reopening of schools this fall?
I did have a conversation with Senator Tester, actually called and complimented and thanked the district and the community for passing the levy. I thought that was very classy. But he said, I can't say specifically, but he thought that maybe there was additional funding in the works coming to school districts. Whether it's coming from the Department of Ed, I do not know that.
Okay, and any other assistance or direction on the federal level? I mean, I noticed that the person in the White House blocked the director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention from testifying before Congress on how to safely reopen schools. Have you had any information or guidance on the federal level about how to do that safely?
Other than the CDC documents, I'm not aware of any. I listed the references that we used in the reopening plan, and so the answer would be no.
Yeah, and any additional resources in regards to testing from the federal government?
I've not received any of that.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I find it interesting that, this person in the White House that not only demands that schools reopen without any regard to safety, does not show any commitment to providing the resources, the tools to make that happen. And then to compound that, threatens to withhold federal funding from schools that attempt to open safely, which, regardless of where anybody is on the political spectrum, that is simply unconscionable to put the safety of our staff and students at risk under threat of congressionally appropriated federal funds. And fortunately, I think most Americans agree. 65%, in fact, it was indicated from a recent poll, disapprove of that person's handling of this crisis in opening schools. So I applaud you for the work that you're doing in the absence of the leadership that we should have at that level.
Any other questions?
Just a question, Greta. Kind of a follow up to what you asked about continuing ed. The concurrent enrollment classes. So, Mr. Upham, I may have missed this. Will all of the core classes remain? So, all of the AP classes that exist now, will they all be able to be taught regardless of what the split is between remote and in-person instruction?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful to that. Again, just remember, when you build master schedules, we build them off of the number of requests per section. So anything usually less than 15 or so is a somewhat of a guiding principle, not maybe so much in SD2, but classes that have low enrollment or low requests usually don't get offered. Okay, this isn't a usual year, right? So if we have the staffing, we would work to make sure that we offer those classes. And that's one of the reasons why we allowed for the flexibility for students in remote to gain access to a student or a class in live if their personal scenario allows for that. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't teach that online. No, that doesn't mean that at all. It's just we won't know until we build the sections and how and what person chooses what, right? But we do. It's safe to say that the remote curriculum will be less than the live curriculum.
So, but students and specifically, talking high school, but they're already registered for classes, right? And so the hope is that all of the classes that kids are registered for, they will be able to take, but that is not a guarantee because it's a challenge, right? Or am I putting words in your mouth?
No, but I'm not overly concerned because if we had to shift AP, well, I can't do physics because of the labs, right? But if we had to shift AP government to remote, there's nothing to say that the student that's involved in live instruction can't go remote and take the class, right? So you see the flexibility that could go back and forth in this, and that's what we would look for. Again, because everything is in such a unique circumstance, I've asked our people to lift some of the fences around the things we've done for years and create a little more flexibility. Now, that's easier said than done, but that's the direction, that's the mindset we're using in this.
Great, thank you.
Anna Hafer.
Greg, do you have a time frame when parents and students will have to make the commitment so that you can do your planning?
Well, I would ask sooner than later, Trustee Hafer. As soon as we get good enough information for them to see, which isn't that far away, then I would ask them to choose ASAP because scheduling that many students is going to take some time. Now, that being said, when I say 5,000, it's not all in one level. That's K2 to 3.5 to 6.8 to 9.12. So it's doable, but as I'm sure right now the associate principals in charge of scheduling are either in therapy or are hyperventilating. So there's some enormous amount of work in front of us.
They're going to need to know what, their numbers and how it's going to be, how they're going to set it up. So you're going to have a deadline.
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
And a few more.
Dr. Yanni?
So, Superintendent Upham, what do we do if it turns out that we're really heavy in a certain part of town where that's where you have, say, instead of a third or 30% or a third of the students wanting to stay home, you have 75% in those schools, and in some other schools, 90% of the kids need to be able to go by the teachers, the parents' needs. Are we prepared to talk about busing and that added cost? I'm also curious if there's an added cost or a financial savings that we're going to be accused of trying to exploit with having a student learning remotely versus in person. Have you any thoughts on any of that stuff yet?
Yeah, it's kept me up a few nights, but in looking at the way that the statistical data is coming out, there aren't any what I would consider enormous anomalies that are going to disrupt. We have, Roger will break it down, but we do have areas that have a higher percentage request than 70 or lower, 70-30. I think the largest change it would be 50-50, but those are in smaller schools. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to accommodate it.
And then on the costs of either the remote learning or is that an added cost to transition a child from an in-class to a remote learning scenario, or is that a cost savings that we're going to be accused of trying to exploit or something?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be the same because the service will be the same. It may free up classified staff to do more supervision. You may have a school of, let's just say an elementary school of 400 students and 150 of those students are requesting remote learning. That school is smaller during the day. And that's what we want, actually. That's why I'm trying to open up as much remote as possible. So mostly the area that'll be impacted the most, it won't be the cost to operate. It'll just be additional staff that would be available because there's fewer live students because of remote, they're in a remote setting, they're home. So that's fewer IPPs, that's those, but we're not looking to eliminate or get rid of anyone. We're going to need them. And really, I haven't touched on this, but I will, but since we're on it right now in the human resources is we struggle with substitute teachers. One of the things that will help is if we have a percentage like I'm seeing, 30% of our students are in remote learning, that actually helps us as far as substitute teachers are concerned. So I have some concern about some of our senior staff. You notice I didn't say older. Some of our senior staff that, may choose not to return. I know there are questions they're asking themselves at this time. That's why I made the announcement about live instruction on August 24th so long ago, was to get people to wrap their mind around it and make some decisions. And basically, the decisions they're making are a direct reflection to where the cases are in our county at this time. That's why I say again, speaking to the community, you need to help us. You need to wear your masks and help us. It's effective. If we can do that, I think we'll be okay.
And then, sorry, last one, I promise. The software that we're going to be using, the tools for the remote learning, have we figured that out yet? Since we went from using Zoom when they were making it free, and now we're stuck with 40 minutes per call and that kind of stuff. Have we worked that out yet?
Yeah, we've drawn some standards around the IT. I don't have them in front of me, but yes, we have, and we haven't communicated that out yet. And so that can be challenging for staff too. You tell someone that's been driving a Ford their whole life that now they have to drive a Chevy, that doesn't go real well. So that's coming forth. I'm not looking forward to that one. But yes, we have identified the standards. The challenge, though, on the high school side is, and Dr. Oshesky can speak to this, when you buy a series, a curriculum series and so on, they don't play well with each other, even as much as you try to standardize that. We've done some work with it, but that's challenging. But in our elementary and middle school, I feel good that we're drawing some standards.
Any other questions? Greg, in regard to staff, are you looking to have some professional learning days set aside for staff prior to the start of school?
Yeah, on the remote learning side, I see us doing a slow rollout. That slow rollout, what I want to be able to do is establish a foundation, especially in the home. And this is what we learned from the remote. I see the slow rollout possibly taking 2 to 3 weeks. So what does that mean? Well, I have to make sure that everyone has the device. I have to make sure that everyone has the internet. We have to make sure that everyone understands how to use the vehicle that we're going to communicate on. All of that to build capacity. So I see us on a slow rollout with that to ensure that we have everything in place. Again, it comes back to what do we do best. I want to make sure that we're there. That's going to take some extra time, I'm sure.
One more question. So, Superintendent Upham, I think I know the answer to this, but just to be clear, if the family has multiple children in the school district, do they need to decide remote learning as a family or in person, or can it be individualized per student?
It can be individualized per student. Now, interesting, and I had another conversation with a family, a grandmother that had multiple children in the family in school, and one of the children was immune compromised, I believe. I don't remember what the issue was, but they had asked about, can our other children stay home because we don't want to take the risk that they would infect their brother. And I said, absolutely. Those are the reasons why we chose to go with a standalone remote. There are just too many COVID issues to try to decipher with fences around it to the best of our ability.
Any other questions before he moves on? All right, go ahead, Greg. Okay,
rest of them shouldn't take too long, other than when we go into detail. Transportation, we started this conversation a long time ago. Set a goal for 1 student per bus seat. I knew that was pie in the sky, but I asked Sandra to look at all of our routes and maximize the routes to the best of the ability, where one, we could maximize the size or the space in the bus, and then also seat family members or household members together. In the elementary, I feel pretty good. In the middle school, it would have taken an additional 10 buses and 10 routes to accomplish that task, and it was not feasible. And so, but again, the face covering is effective, and so we will have to use face covering. And the high school transportation, we're pretty good. And when we go through this in more detail, we'll have numbers available to you, so you'll be able to see capacity percentages in our buses. Now, remember, when you offer transportation, you want every seat filled, right? So you maximize the seating. So to ask the transportation department to do a 180-degree turn is challenging. And so I think Sandra's done a very, very good job of doing the best that we can, but middle school is tight. It is. That's just a fact. And we are going to run into some routes with elementaries where we're going to have more than 1 student per seat. Maybe there's other things that we can do as we work through this, but from that perspective, that's the story with transportation, not to mention the disinfecting and so on and so forth. As far as activities go, this will be a major topic. And as I said, on Wednesday, the MHSA, most current MHSA guidelines will come out, because the activities really challenges some of the cohorting, other than you being in that sport. But different sports have different issues. You know, golf and cross country is different than football, in those types of situations. So I don't want to gloss over that, because that is another extensive effort that we will go into. So, and the last point, and we can come back to this too. I just know we're coming on 10 after 8, and this is important. I get that. And then human resources is the last high point that I want to talk through. We're working in areas where there aren't any laws written. We are working individually with our staff. I don't want anybody to become afraid. There are some significant challenges, though. There really are. You know, we will follow ADA guidelines and work to the best of our ability through, you know, civil rights and those types of issues. But I want to go back to the instructional platforms. Again, the standalone remote allows us some flexibility and some space in being human beings. And that's what we're going to do our best to do. There are standards that we're going to have to address. There are difficult questions in front of us. There are assignments where staff are going to have to report. That's a given. But at the same time, we want to do our best to be human beings in an unprecedented situation. So we are working right now on individual basis, on an individual basis with employees, trying to do the best we can to support their needs, and at the same time educate our students. So there are some significant challenges in front of us. Those are the high points. When we reschedule a single topic meeting, I will have the executive directors that are in charge of these areas go into much more detail about what does it look like. So I'll stop there.
Are there any final questions to ask of Greg?
Madam Chair.
Mike Leo.
Yeah, Superintendent, just a quick one. As far as transportation, is there a protocol that's been adopted to have the windows in the buses open for maximum ventilation, you know, down to a certain air temperature?
Sandra, would you like to address that? You're muted.
Yeah, gotcha. We certainly can do that. Listen, the policy on the buses, I think, is that they don't have the windows down any further than 1/3, so that they can't get, you know, full arms or heads out the window. But we certainly can have that conversation with first students about lowering the buses when the weather is in agreement, you know, to have them down 1/3. And if there are any concerns with that, after I get to talking to first students, I can certainly bring that back to the superintendent and to the board.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's something we definitely want to, you know, check with the county health officer to see what kind of an advantage that would bring. It just seems like that might be a thing we could take advantage of, because that's going to be one of the most confining spaces where our kids are together.
Yes, that's very true. I will say though, and we'll wait for the meeting next week, but if there is a possibility that 30% of students will be in online learning, I would say that we're in pretty good shape to be able to seat students one per seat. I'm not saying it's 100%, but I would say that if we were missing the same percentage off of bus routes, we are probably going to be in pretty decent shape, but we want to do everything we can besides that. So yes, and we'll talk to Susan about that.
Right, and I think any reduction in, you know, density through any means, whether it be online learning or otherwise, is going to be helpful. At the same time, kids that are on the bus for 30 to 45 minutes, even though they're one per seat, they're still less than 6 feet from the kid in front of them and behind them.
Absolutely.
So I think, this should be verified with county health people, but looking at maximizing ventilation in the buses, I think would be worthwhile.
We will do that.
Any other questions? Craig, I just have a touchback to the instructional model. You had mentioned a couple times that the online learning will not be as robust as a live instruction. Is there a plan in place to provide interventionists for online learning?
Let me clarify robust. Our plan is to have instruction as robust online as it is in live. To clarify that, it won't have as many offerings as live. Obviously, it's hard to simulate labs and vocational areas and those types of things. But depending on the amount of students that we have, the answer is yes. Obviously remote learning will have to have the same supports that live instruction have: counseling, administrative support, interventionists, all the above. What does that look like in a remote? Well, here we go. So we would try and staff that just like we would as if they were in live instruction, to the best of our ability. So I'm going to have to rely on much better prepared individuals than myself about remote, because I'm still in the cave, but I'm looking to come out at some point in time. But right now I need the people who are there, and we have them.
Thanks. Is there any other question or comment, Superintendent Upham? So Greg, I think that brings you on to your ongoing conversations with the AA superintendents.
Yeah, we've had ongoing consistently to talk about different venues, and you see across the state just in the last week, midweek, late last week, where districts are starting to unfold their learning platforms. I think you'll see fairly similar platforms. I mean, there are some school districts that are going to different instructional models, maybe not quite as robust remotely as we are. And then also the regular school day, I haven't seen anything conclusive as of yet. I know that there had been discussions about some block scheduling and so on and so forth. Again, for us, I wanted to do what we do best if we're going to come back. So yeah, we are in consistent contact with each other about all the issues surrounding the COVID, and we're using the expertise of each other as we move forward, for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate the ability to collaborate with others that are dealing with the larger school issues that we're dealing with here. That's a real feather in your cap to have that relationship continue to build and grow. Any other questions for Superintendent Upham before we move on? Okay, that brings us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Board Operation Committee report. And what has been included is the trustees meeting calendar, the school visits calendar, and the trustee committee assignments. Greg has brought up that he has requested a special board meeting, and so I will honor that request. We are looking at next Wednesday and I'm looking at times of 9 a.m., 1 p.m., or 5:30. And Greg, if you would have Marta send out an email to the board members to find out what times would work best for them, and we'll go from that.
Sure.
Okay. And then the next item on the agenda moves us to Planning and Development Committee report, and Jana will be updating us on Metro Park, Downtown Billings Partnership, CTE, and the solar project update. I'll pass that on to you, Ms. Hafer.
Thank you, Greta. Is it possible to move Russ to the top right now? He is a guest here.
It wasn't changed at the time of the agenda.
Okay.
So I think we'll need to go through these first and.
Okay, it will be quick.
Bear with us.
Yes. Well, the Metro discussions, I think probably everyone knows, there has been a lawsuit to hold up the demolition of the grandstands. Greg, do you have anything else you want to report?
I don't, Trustee Hafer. I think we'll watch that issue unfold. So.
Okay, thank you. The Downtown Billings Partnership meeting update. We do have Russ Fagg here as a guest. We will get to him in a minute to discuss the Founders District. The other thing was last month we talked about the one-way to two-way conversions downtown, specifically 29th and 30th. There was a survey sent out by the partnership, and it looks like most are in favor of that. It even looks like the city council is going to perhaps move that to construction in 2021. There would not be any street closures, mainly change in signage and restriping, that kind of thing. But it affects the Lincoln Center on both sides. The other thing was they have hired a new a resource outreach coordinator who deals with individuals downtown to help them with treatment rather than incarceration if they're dealing with addiction. Those are probably the highlights for the downtown partnership. The next item is the CTE update, and I do have Bo on here. He did mention a few things at our planning and development meeting. So Bo, could you give us the quick rundown, please?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Hafer. Like she said, I will be quick. I know I can get long-winded with this stuff, but I'll provide the high points. So I wanted to mention the St. John's nursing apprenticeship that we've been working on with St. John's and some of our students. So basically, they set up a nursing apprenticeship that would allow someone to work as a CNA, pursue a higher degree, either an LPN or an RN, while they're working at St. John's, and every hour they worked would go towards the tuition that it would cost to go to nursing school. And then at the end of the, however long that takes, it could start as early as junior year. They have some individuals that were seniors. They've got some individuals that are as old as adults. Basically, once you get your nursing license, so you take your NCLEX and you now are a licensed RN or LPN, you have no additional employment obligation to St. John's. So basically a student can work, I believe it comes out to around 8 hours a week as a CNA. They'll help them pay for their, and they actually help facilitate getting them into the nursing school. So they have a partnership with Miles Community College, and we had a signing event for that because 3 of our students were awarded an apprenticeship spot. So that was a huge win. They're obviously a frontline healthcare provider in this, trying to protect our most vulnerable populations. So that was a huge win that we've been working on for the last couple of months. Brief update on the construction facilities, equipment and tools that we're shifting towards more of an industry-based or industry-facing construction program. We've got facilities, and we've talked with Scott about getting them some of the spacing that they needed. Some schools that was concrete slabs, shipping containers, those types of things to be able to, build, like, say, a shed or something outside. We're currently going through the equipment and tool lists that they're going to need, because it's going to obviously look a lot different if they're going to be outside building, on these concrete slabs that we're building them and building houses and sheds and those types of things. They're going to need some different tools. So we're working through that, and we've got their budget or their list that they need, and we'll be using some of the CTE and grant money potentially for that. And then last, we just met today with them on the curriculum that they decided. I think Chris can touch on that when he brings it in front of the board, but all the construction teachers were really excited with the curriculum that they'd chosen to kind of shift to. And then lastly, just wanted to update you. We've kind of streamlined the process for internship for credit. In the past, it was really, it's no one's fault, but it was really tough to figure out who was doing what and when a student came to us and said, hey, I'm interested in an internship in accounting, or construction or whatever. And it was also when a business came and said, hey, we'd love to offer an internship, how would we build this so that we could give this, so a student could get credit and they could have this experience. So we worked really hard, our career team, before they're off this month, but before they left, we basically got it in place so that we know exactly what we're doing on our end. And when those requests come in, we'll be able to kind of facilitate those opportunities a lot quicker because we have that process out. And right now we're working on an accounting one, graphic design, a CNA, a floor installer, and potentially some other construction related ones based off of some of the requests we've got. So yeah, that's all I've got. So I'll welcome any questions about any of those.
Thank you, Bo. That was fast. Does anyone have any questions for Bo? I know this is a moving target, and you're doing a wonderful job trying to accommodate all these needs of all our students. Thank you, Bo. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to move on then to the solar project update. I don't know if anyone saw the video that Scott posted. If you watch it, you can see the West High solar project. It was done in just no time at all. You just turn on that video and it's just done. So that was very fun. Do you have any other updates for us, Scott?
No, the West High solar project is complete, and that time-lapse video I sent out was pretty neat to watch. We did receive the grant funding last week from Northwestern Energy for that project, and we're waiting to hear on the Castle Rock project.
And we're waiting to hear what?
On the Castle Rock
Oh,
project.
right. Okay. All right. Any questions for Scott? All right. Thank you, Scott. Then now we can move on to our guest. Russ, thank you for being here. And Jeff Canning. They are representing the Founders District west of downtown Billings, and they would like to present for our consideration. The planning and development, they came to planning and development, and we voted to move them forward to the full board for our consideration. So who wants to take it first?
Jeff's going to lead us off.
Okay, Jeff, it's you.
Thank you, Trustee Hafer, Madam Chair. Began working with United Properties and the YMCA in 2016, looking at the development of their joint property between their two facilities. And over the years, we've built a coalition, not only those two great companies, but also First Interstate Bank, both hospitals, St. John's United, KTVQ, and Russ Fag and his family group. So last October, we convened a meeting to look at our options for developing the area we term the Founders District, which is basically west of North 31st Street over to Division. There is an opportunity zone in place right now, which is a great private mechanism for helping aid in development. And so we're looking at the opportunity of what kind of public program would be available to help in development. And so we're here tonight to ask your support in the formation of a TIF district, tax increment financing district for that area. We believe it's one of our strongest tools to promote development in that area. So Russ and I had commissioned a study that we received, and that final copy has been sent on to you as well. And it did agree with us that it met more than the minimum 3 requirements to be considered an area with blight, and would definitely benefit from this type of tax program in order to aid in development. Over the last 10 years, the average curve, this part of town's tax base is stagnant compared to the rest of the city. It's about 17% behind, and it actually could be argued it peaked out in about 2016, and actually the tax base has been decreasing since then. And Russ and I's big drive here is housing, what we can do there. Downtown is about 200 residents over the last several years, and so we're looking forward to seeing what we could do with this program to increase housing opportunities to serve our workforce and other people's needs in that area. So again, we're looking to form a separate district next to the current downtown district, and for the benefits that we can derive from that. So we're asking for your support of that tonight. We are scheduled to have a work session with the city council here sometime in August at one of their work sessions. There will be other public meetings as well that you'll have an opportunity to speak at. We would very much appreciate you going on record of supporting this TIF district. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, or Russ would as well.
Thank you. If you aren't familiar with tax increment financing, the taxes on the area would, if the district is created, would stay at the current level. And then as the projects are completed and the tax base increases, then the taxes go up. But in the interim, which is usually 15 years approximately, the taxes would not increase. That the increased taxes would go to the projects in the area until the TIF sunsets. So that's why they are coming to the school district, because we benefit from the tax base.
And
Jeff.
Trustee Hafer, we believe that this is actually in best interest of the school district. Again, I'm an architect, and as we look at school projects, we call it institutional grade. We're looking for 25 to 50-year solutions. And we believe in this case, what small tax base you may not benefit from now is worth it, because over the long run, we hope to increase this area's tax base by quite a bit, which would ultimately benefit the school district much more. As I mentioned, this area is actually decreasing right now in its tax base.
Yes. And Russ, did you have something to add?
Jeff explained it well, and so did you. This has been a long meeting. I'm open to any questions, and if anybody has further questions about the TIF itself, I'm open to that, or potential projects in that district, I'm open to that, but I don't want to prolong the meeting unless anybody has any questions.
Okay. Greta?
Rosa and Jeff, you did a fabulous job presenting to planning and development and brought forth how the rationale for the support that we would like to lend to you on behalf of the district. We came out of planning and development with a recommendation to support your desire to have an individual TIF district with a time freeze per se of 10 years instead of 15 years, knowing that it is up to the city council to make that decision. So I would like to make that motion for our board that we would support the independent TIF district being established, the Founders Park Area Urban Renewal District, with a duration of 10 years.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Was that Joe?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion, or do we have any questions?
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes. Trustee McCullough.
I'm going to vote no on the motion. I cannot, in good conscience, talk to my constituents about asking them for more money when the district supports the notion that right now we would reduce the income coming into this district on the hopes that perhaps 10 or 15 years in the future, there would be an increase in that amount of money. So to me, the now is more important than the future. And so I will vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Do we have any other comments or discussion? Questions? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Let's see, do I have my list here? Joe Raffiani.
Aye.
Greta. Greta?
Apologize, I was on mute. Aye.
Okay, Jen.
Aye.
Russ.
Aye.
Scott.
No.
Who else do we have here? Am I missing anyone? Mike, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Is anyone else on?
Tanya stepped off.
Okay.
You need to vote.
So I have 5-1. All right, the motion passes. Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. And thank you for being patient.
Thank you for your support and all you do for our community.
Very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is the land sale next to Riverside School. Scott, what do you have for us?
The only new piece I have right at the moment, actually, I have two of them. I think we've all looked at this a little bit previously at the last board meeting, and there's one new piece on here that's attached. It's kind of a cost estimate from Halting, our owner's rep, on possible development of the land. Should the district decide to move forward with that, and he just picked out. This was Shane Swandle. Picked out a few of the projects on there and what it would take to develop. And this is for a baseball, softball area, more of an equity type thing to keep up with the other middle schools. So as you'll see, the cost for development of that, his estimate is $1,015,367 is what he would expect to see on that. It's with the backstops and parking and all that you see on the sheet. The other new piece I have, which really isn't anything yet, but I did get an appraiser to take a look at the land, and we're on the schedule to have that done. I can't tell you when it'll be done, but it is on his schedule to be done.
Great. Okay, thank you. So you will report at the next planning and development if you have any updates on the appraisal, either date or amount?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then also someone was going to look into the intercap loan through the state fund. Was that
Yep.
you or was that Craig?
I looked into that, Trustee Hafer. Yeah, I went out and assessed on the website. They have a calculator out there, and it's a variable interest rate. It just changes annually, but right now they're lending at a 2.5% interest rate, which is pretty favorable, just compared to historical numbers over the last couple of years. And then they let you pick the term and the amount of years that you would like to take that loan out for. So just as an example, if we were talking about a $500,000 purchase price for that piece of property, and you were to say take a 5-year loan out at 2.5%, over the course of that 5 years, you'd end up paying roughly $35,000 or so in interest expense. And then that varies, just depending on the length of the loan itself. But that just gives a general idea of, the interest costs that may be associated if we go with that intercap loan. And as I stated before, the one advantage to the intercap loan is that expense is able to be spread across multiple fiscal years rather than having to take the full purchase of the property in one single fiscal year. So
Is there a maximum length of the term?
I at least online in the drop down calculator, I saw it goes up to 15 years. But I could certainly look in to see if that's the max.
Okay. Well, thank you for that information. We will obviously have to have the appraisal, so we will take this up at the next planning and development. So I think that's all we have. Is that correct? Anybody else have anything that I missed? Okay, Greta, back to you.
Thank you. Next item is the Stakeholder Relations Committee report. Mike Leo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Stakeholders Committee did not meet, and just in respect of all the folks at the district and the time constraints that they're under with the reopening of schools, we've decided to defer until September, the next Stakeholders Committee meeting. However, staff are working on certain items. In regards to the Advanced Opportunities Act, they are continuing to drill down to the budget line item level so we can spend that money responsibly and equitably for programs for entire groups of people. So for example, maybe a CNA training class would have kind of a checklist of items that would be needed for them to operate, say, in a internship or apprenticeship situation. And the advanced opportunities funding would purchase scrubs, stethoscopes, whatever was needed, and so on throughout the different pathways that we have. So, like I said, staff are looking at that, and we should have more reported back to us in September on that meeting. One really positive note, just quickly, is that in speaking with the CTE partnership members around how to allocate these resources so that students are prepared to work with them in the field, they have come forward and offered in-kind assistance and donations as far as equipment and other things that they're willing to donate in order to move the program forward. So in essence, what we're doing is leveraging those advanced opportunity dollars, not just spending them one-to-one, but actually getting a financial advantage out of our partnership so that the actual benefit is greater than the sum of just those dollars that were allocated.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And that moves us on to curriculum and instruction. And Dr. Olszewski has put an item on the consent agenda, so he wants to give us a brief update on that.
Madam Chair, members of the board, just again, a brief update as we do for second reads, which is in the the consent agenda, our second read for the 3 books that are on that list for final approval. We did not receive any public comment over the last 30 days.
Any questions for Chris? Thanks, Chris. All right, next item is the budget update with Mr. Craig Van Ice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So attached to the agenda is a view of the general fund financial results that we've been looking at ever since January. So I've got draft on here. We're still finalizing our June actuals. Probably going to be done with that this week, but overall we're pretty much settled. There's just a few more entries to be making, but overall what you can see on here, if you focus on the top section and over on the far left, you can see we're anticipating the elementary general fund to land at a deficit of about $2.9 million. That is just a bit less than our initial forecast we put out in January. We were carrying about a $3.4 million deficit at that time. So again, that's reduced down to about 2.9. We've spoken a little bit to some COVID savings to account for there, and I'll speak to that as we move through the spreadsheet. On the high school side, you can see that there's a surplus of just over $800,000. But one item of note is last year when the high school general levy passed, we needed to get some textbooks as part of that levy passing in the door. And so just based on some of the purchasing laws and, when you purchase items, they have to be entered into a particular fiscal year. We wanted to avoid those hitting our 2018-2019 general fund budget. So what we did instead, we used our multi-district fund to purchase those textbooks in June of last year to avoid them hitting our fiscal year for 2018-2019, knowing that at the end of this year we'd have that $700,000 or so left over to reintroduce back into the multi-district fund. So of that $800,000 or so variance, $700,000 of it was already earmarked to go back to pay for those textbooks. So I just want to point that out, that that $700,000 or so in textbook expense, even though it isn't showing in this year's results, will start back up again next year and hit the 2020-21 fiscal year. So that's just a consideration we need to account for. Looking down at the bottom, just the comparison. So I'm saying this is the comparison versus the 6+6 forecast. That was the forecast from January, where at that point we had 6 months of actuals and we were looking forward 6 months for forecast. You can see, overall 6-month total on the elementary general fund side, that $500,000 or so means we our forecast expected about $500,000 more in expense than what came to fruition in reality. Similar on the high school side, about $400,000 underspent versus the predictions we had that we put out in January. And you can see the variances versus those totals on the high school side, about 1.02%, and on the high school, sorry, that was the elementary, and on the high school side, just over 1.5%. And then just over on the far right, just to throw this out there, wanted to put in, we've talked last month about COVID savings. During the during the June meeting, we talked that at that point we had tallied up about $600,000 in savings between the two districts. Once we got through June and got some of the other utility bills paid that were a couple weeks or months in arrears, that total savings jumped up to about $700,000. So, and it's split roughly $300,000 in the elementary, $400,000 in the high school. So once you take those COVID savings upsides out of the equation, that's what I've done over here on the far right. That brings those variances to our forecasted numbers even lower, bringing our overall percent variances, below 0.5% in the elementary and almost spot on in the high school. So if there's any questions on this view, I'm happy to field them. And then before we get out of budget, I also want to touch briefly on the governor's press conference on Thursday and the other money that they have set aside for school districts, just because that was announced after we had this agenda in place, and I didn't have an opportunity to get that on this agenda. So I guess I'll start with any questions on the general fund outlook.
I've got a question, but more of a statement, I think. So thank you, again, for listing out, what the forecasts were versus the actuals. My whole thought process, and asking for that is to let people know that when we say that we have a deficit upcoming in the elementary fund, we're very good at, determining what that is. You and your office do a great job with that, Craig. And so it's fascinating to me to look at this and, recognize that, there was a variance. We were under a little bit, but you take out the COVID savings and we're pretty much spot on. So there's no crying wolf here. There's we're at a deficit. We have very good forecasted numbers, and they continue to write out over time that, what you think is going to happen, that the spend that we think is going to happen is actually coming in. So it's just a kudos that it's the great job you guys are doing. And thank you for the accurate reporting that you're doing, both with the forecasting and the actuals.
Thanks, Russ. Any other questions of Craig before he goes on?
Madam Chair.
Joe Raffiani.
So, Craig, what is in the past when we've had a deficit like this, we've used one-time monies. Do we have enough in the multi-district funds to be able to cover these deficits on either now or in the future?
Yeah, we do this year. I'm expecting the multi-district when the supplement takes place to backfill this $2.8 million to fix the elementary deficit. I would expect at that point our multi-district will be, if not fully exhausted, very close. Now there are other pockets of one-time money that would also be eligible for use for a general fund deficit type situation. But yeah, I guess as we're speaking specifically to this year in the multi-district fund, once this is done, that fund itself will be pretty much diminished.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So Craig, next month, will you be able to, since we have the passage of the levy again, we very much appreciate the support of our community in passing that levy. Will you be able to plug in those numbers and give us some forecast for the next 3 to 5 years?
I think to a point, right now we have negotiations ongoing, which is another variable that would need to be factored in. But part of what we've been doing ever since last year when this issue first raised itself has been trying to get as accurate of a 5-year outlook as we can. So I'm thinking for August, the August board meeting is when we'll be adopting the budget for next year. I think at that point, I'll be able to at least have a pretty good idea of where we feel we should land, and then we will be budgeting our funds accordingly to compensate for where we think we'll land. I think once all the dust has settled with year-end negotiations and getting into the school year, it's probably realistic to think something like this could be available in September. But again, some of this CARES money and still understanding how we're going to utilize that money really plays a big part in trying to put a forecast together. So probably whatever I come out with in the August or September timeframe will have a big asterisk next to it saying, here's some variables that need to be accounted for before we consider this our official line in the sand.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Craig? All right, thanks, Craig. That moves us on to Scott Ryder and the bond projects update.
And Madam Chair, do you mind, can I touch on the CARES money real quick?
Oh, certainly, go ahead. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So yeah, on Thursday, Governor Bullock announced, another $75 million using the state's coronavirus fund relief fund, set aside $75 million more for school districts. And so we were waiting really since Friday and over the weekend to see how that would shake out for Billings. We now know that of the 75, they carved 10 million out specifically for transportation and set that aside. So we're still waiting on guidance for how the transportation money is going to work. But of the remaining 65 million, they based it on our budgeted student count for the upcoming school year. And they based the allocation based on that number of students. So some of you may have seen the press release that showed by district how much each elementary and high school district should receive across the state. For Billings, it totals about $7.3 million. So that'd be above and beyond the $3 million we'd received as part of the ESSER funds back in April, the original carve out of $41 million statewide. So that puts us at roughly $10+ million. But of that 7.3, we're still waiting on guidance of whether there'll need to be another set aside for the non-public entities in the area. And we're also waiting on guidance in terms of how flexible we'll be able to use those dollars in this latest set aside from the state. So more to come, but just wanted to get the board aware that that's something we're monitoring and waiting to answer some of those unanswered questions on how we can use those funds.
Thanks, Greg. Any questions on that? I appreciate the fact that it was done on an A and B status as opposed to an economy of scale. I think that was the right thing to do, and I appreciate that, the way in which the money was dispersed to the school districts. Not seeing anyone waving their hand, we'll move on to the bond projects now. Scott Ryder.
Okay, there's two sets of attachments on this. The first one should be quite a few pictures taken of some various projects around the district. And I apologize, the camera I was using, I lost the pictures somehow on it on the first round. So Dennis and I scrambled and tried to get as many as we could in that last day or two. But I think they're pretty well marked. I can't pull them up on my iPad. It's too large. So I can't look at them with you, but I think they're all pretty well marked. I'd be happy to answer any questions on those that you may have or anything that you'd like to see next month. The other attachment is the Castle Rock green space parking lot, and it's showing the sidewalks, proposed sidewalks that we're looking to add to connect to some of the park features that the city park is looking to put in. And you'll see a walkway, a concrete walkway, a sidewalk going north towards the north end of the green space fields to connect with the park. There's also one going down and around and comes out down on Constitution around the side of the parking lot. So those all came in under the the $20,000 that the board typically sees. But the comments are welcome on them. If you have something you'd like to say on it, or if you don't want those in there, either way. But they're also, we have them looking at connecting potentially with some walking paths. There'll possibly be some crushed granite or something like that, similar to what the park would put in, as they determine where those outlets will come in, and just tie in the park for better circulation for people to use.
Any questions for Scott? Scott, what's the timeline for completion of the Castle Rock Park area?
The timeline has always been so far before school starts on August 24th. So I think we typically have them as August 15th, and I don't have that sheet in front of me, but it's right in that range. Depending on how many change orders we make along the way and add projects. This one shouldn't have a large impact on the schedule if we choose to go forward with this. So the pricing looks pretty favorable for it. So I think it'd be a good amenity for that area.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Scott?
Just a simple question. So Scott, I've been in the senior high parking lot, multiple times this summer. What's our total square footage or how many, what's the size of roofs that are being replaced across the district? I don't know if that's measured by squares or square feet, but it's a lot.
It's square feet, and I don't have that total number with me right now, but I could sure get it to you.
No. It's mainly just saying this is a huge job. Just the roofs alone that is hours and hours and hours of work. So, kudos for putting that together. Those are huge projects and, great crews that are taking care of that. So thank you.
Thanks.
That moves us on to the MTSBA update, and the board's updated on what happened at the MTSBA annual meeting that was held in June. And I think where'd Mike go?
I'm here.
There you are. This was requested by you just to give the board a quick update on the annual meeting.
Right. So the annual meeting was held virtually with members voting, and the basic construct of this was to take groups of resolutions that have come from the districts and put them into sort of a single batch for the purposes of MTSBA, which acts as sort of our lobbying firm in the Capitol during the session. By combining those, it gives them greater flexibility to both write, propose, and advocate for those legislative initiatives, but not necessarily as single pieces of legislation. So we'll see how that goes. Remains to be seen. Above all, there was a commitment that in the next session, the priority is to hold ground as far as funding for education in Montana. Because of the situation we're in, state revenues could be stressed considerably. So the first and foremost priority is to maintain the district's whole financially, and then to advance the legislative initiatives.
Thank you. They're forecasting a $300 million deficit, and so there is quite concern that cutting may come to the schools. MTSBA, because of the COVID, has chosen not to have any on-site meetings until 2021. There is a plan to have a 4-hour strategic planning session, and if that does come to fruition, I will report back to the board. Anything else on that? Okay, that brings us to the consent agenda, but before we do the consent agenda, you folks may have noticed there's a Russell RJ on our screen, and that is a new K-12 executive director. And so I asked Superintendent Upham if he would like to introduce him.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. With the retirement of Mr. Cobb, Randy joins our team. Randy has been a longtime administrator in Montana and has been a teacher in Washington and I believe Wisconsin too, right? Randy, am I right with that?
Yeah, actually an administrator in New York, right?
Oh, okay. And so Randy spent a large portion of his career in Bozeman as the activities director, and then served as a superintendent in Clyde Park and Gardner, and he was an assistant principal at Senior, and we're very fortunate to have him, and his expertise and wider range of experiences has really come in handy. So I'd like to introduce Randy Russell. Randy, do you want to say a few words?
You know, nothing more than what you've said, Greg. I'm entering my 27th year in education. As Greg alluded, I've served in a number of different capacities in education, and I really look forward to, you know, being here in Billings. Appreciated my last year at senior high, and looking forward to this new opportunity here at Lincoln Center.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Look forward to working with you. And that brings us to the consent agenda, which is used to conserve time, contains items of routine nature, which do not normally require deliberation. The items will be accepted and approved in one action. Is there a motion to approve? Or, yes, motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Raffiani. And a second?
I'll second.
A second by Jen. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Since I didn't do a roll call vote, no one's opposed, so we are all in favor that are present. And without objection, I will adjourn this meeting. No objections? We are adjourned. Have a good evening, folks. Stay well.
Bye, everybody.